All right, guys, welcome everyone. I apologize for delay, had some bugs. Software use also has bugs. So as you can see, we all need QA everywhere. And I had some issue with Slack. So Slack was sending invite to me and I was not able, so I was trying to join last 30 minutes. So I was also waiting, not only you. I do apologize for delay. So we're gonna spend a bit more time to compensate for it. So welcome everyone for day one. For automated testing with Java, Cucumber, and WebDriver. And I normally start with a question. So you feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. I'll make pauses as I go whenever I feel this is a good time for asking questions. Try to organize it that way. So have some sections and have some discussions and welcome to engage. But in general, when I go through a list of slides, please spend time to listen and then you'll have time and we'll pause for questions to go forward. So this is today's introductory session and normally start with a question. So let's get to it. So what do you think? How many programmers does it take to change the light bulb?
5.
5. So why 5? Why is it 5?
One holding the lamp and 4 rotating the chair,
Okay.
which is like one is standing on.
That's a good answer. It's a magic number, right? 5 is magic number, but actually none.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, even I was thinking on that.
They don't work in this
Why we need a programmer to change the bulb?
Yeah. So the point of this question is that if you have some special skill, you don't need to do some redundant work anymore, right? So QA is a fun. Definitely, QA is engineering. Is fun. No question about it. But automation is more fun. So if you have a skill that you can automate, you have more proficient specific skill, then you don't need to do basic work anymore. So you write code, right? So you don't change the bulb anymore. So you just redirect it. So and that's the point of this course, to give you a skill that will allow you to play that role, right? So move forward in your career and be able to do that. There's more options. Of course, you can always say like developer does. The light bulb does fine in my office. So it works on my computer, right? And I think some of you who worked as QA might have heard about it, but that's another take of it. Okay, so just a couple of words. My name is Slava, and I've been working as Scrum Master, and I've been automation architect, and I was working with multiple languages, mostly Java, but also quite a lot of Ruby and Python. And there's also JavaScript-based frameworks. And there's if you talk about automation, there are automation, like different levels of it. So it's not only automation of UI, right? But there's a REST API. There's a new things that coming and like GraphQL. SOAP is quite going to the past. That's also kind of interesting area, and database automation is another one. So that's mostly I'm going to use my skills from REST API and UI automation for this course. So I did work in multiple trials, errors. I tried different options, failed. So I'm going to teach you based on my experience. Automation is the main where it's still in becoming phase. So there's no truth to be told. Like development is pretty well established, right? You have the patterns you have to know. You have a list of technologies you have to know. If you backend, you have to know ABC, right? If you have front end, you have to know different tech. In automation, definitely you should be able to have QA skill, number one. And if some of you who works already as QA engineers, it's going to be great help. And second of all, there is also, of course, coding skills. So you should be able to code. But there is no such rules like patterns and at least well-defined rules. So this is an area where sometimes developer come by and says, oh, you do everything wrong. do this way, and they, go into tank and they try like to shoot birds with the tank, so they use some practices that's very heavy and not needed for automation. So automation is a lightweight discipline. So very important that automation is stable. I heard a lot that some people have a lot of automation frameworks. However, it's basically like 20% failures, 30% failures. And that's really bad because essentially it's hundreds of scenarios that are just not used. So stability is critical. And I'm going to teach based on that approach, how to make automation stable. And it's very important from very beginning to get into that. So not learn like really super advanced patterns and this and that, but be able to write stable code, simple, so you can really get into it. At the same time, it's working in a reliable way. And there's different practices, from the coding practices to the actual selectors and so on and so forth. It's like supposed to be visual representation. So what's expected from your side? So essentially, if you work hard to learn, if you learn hard, if you're ready to learn hard, there's not much. Computer savvy, so you should know how to install applications, how to configure applications, basic ones. And I'm going to send you manuals. And if you stuck, it'll help you to unblock. But this is like basic working with application skill that you expected you have. HTML knowledge, another one. That's something that is we're going to acquire today. So we're going to remind ourselves. And it's not really that critical. As we go, we learn it. In automation, more important not to have knowledge about what this or that element means, but mostly use it to select some visual, right? So you can interact with that. So essentially you tell the code to do something for you. And where you click your mouse, right, visually, you need to tell location to the code. So that's why HTML comes into place. But we'll learn what's needed in this course. And of course, I would say this is the most important, is practice in class and outside of the class. So I'm going to give you a lot of homework. I'm really asking you, and I've seen it many times, the key to success is basically practice outside of the class. This is same for any other discipline, of course, but this is very critical for automation, because if you just look in how to code, you don't really learn how to code. You want to look how it's coded, right? And then you're going to get homework very similar to what we are doing in the class, and try to do yourself. You might not be able to do every single one. However, I would like you to spend time for it, right? So it's important. I myself often found some tasks very impossible when I was sitting starting to do it. And I spent like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then I suddenly realized, okay, this is how it works. So like when you just sit, you need to find a motivation, right? You signed up. Very important, you continue through that, right? So you already have motivation, you joined, right? You made a decision. Now you have to make a decision to make it successful exercise. And the part of success is practice. So and if you sit and you have no idea what's going on, it's okay. It's expected. That's expected result, right? How do you like to say in QA? But you need to spend time, essentially, and eventually you'll get it. So it's essentially a direct proportion of your time spending to learn. Your skill is in direct proportion. And what we're going to do in this course, I'm going to send you a survey, and you're going to answer it. And based on your skill set, I'm going to separate you into groups and have leads where you will have extra sessions a week, and you can decide, like in smaller groups where you can get more help. You will decide. So I'll let you know who are leads, and we'll create separate channels for it. And all you want to do with the leads is just to meet once, twice a week extra, and just do homework or talk through the questions, or like essentially you need people within your group that you can go ahead and solve some tasks. It's in addition to our normal classes. And that's really important for your success. So that's very important. And I'll try to do my best job to find the proper leads. So they're going to guide you and help. And for those who want to be a lead, who has a bit more exposure or who want to learn more, I'm really appreciate it, because that's super helpful for those who play lead role. That's like double growth. But you should have a bit more experience. You should be able to add to others' knowledge. So I'll
sorry, question.
Go ahead.
How many people in a group? How many groups?
So it's about four. Probably we're going to have 4 groups. It's around under 10 people. That's where same principles Agile. You know, Scrum teams should be the one size that it should be able to feed the 2 pizzas. Right. It's the same, about the same. So it will be around 8 to 10 people. That's ideal size. All right. So so that's pretty much it. I just want to emphasize this very, very important, critical. I also bring some guest speakers, and we'll see. So maybe towards the end, that they share their experience, but very important you guys practice from very beginning. And you don't expect, you're not expected to work like this. So I make pauses, you ask questions, and you do homework. That's very important. So again, if you have able to solve half of tasks, that's okay, right? You spend time, put some discipline, like decide on the time you sit and just, even if you stare in the screen, that's okay. Right? Again, realization will come. And then we have sessions together, right, to solve tasks and homework. That's pretty much those groups are for. You don't have any other tasks than do homework together. Very simple. Okay, so I think it's swearing at me that I need to do some. Yeah, it's like this is day 2. It's kind of preview, right? But we're gonna get back to it later. So, okay, so yeah, so if you have the skill, you have definitely more possibilities, more opportunities to do 100%. And not only automation, but it's beyond automation. It's as QA engineers now expected to do automation, even that it's not their title. So what's the schedule that we're gonna do? We're gonna have a Monday and Thursdays at specific time, 7 to 10. And you're gonna have extra time also. And I'm gonna have also extra time with leads to coordinate, to make sure to get feedback and work together on overall class success. So what tools do we use? You might heard about IDE, and we use IntelliJ IDEA. It's a community edition, free, the latest. Doesn't matter which version, to be honest, but it's a learning class. I tend to use the latest. I update the latest before each class, so that's the latest version of community edition available. Again, that's the latest Java available, 17. You can be also okay with Java, probably 11. 11 is also fine, but the latest 17 is still kind of not fully ready. But again, we're not using really that top-notch technologies from 17. This is a new LTS, long-term support version that just came last month. But we're going to focus on raw Java. You're just going to use this the tool set. But if you work with 11, if you work even 8, to be honest, majority of work we're going to do is on Java 8. Why? Because most of the work and most of companies for automation, they use 8. So that's why. So 8 is a little bit more complicated than 11, 17, a little bit more heavy on the syntax. But we're gonna kind of look at that level because that's what you get most interview questions about. So far, so good. Any questions about logistics?
Yes, I have a question. How many lessons we have?
Well, normally we have around 20. So sometimes,
Okay.
so my goal is not to give you 20 sessions, but to give some material which I believe would, assuming you are practicing, and again, that's expectation from your side. That's critical in my mind. So it will give you an opportunity to get a job, and it's 20. I sometimes add like 1, 2, 5 on top of it. If I feel we need more time, different groups move a bit different speed. If I feel I need a bit more time, I'll just slow down a bit. So this will result in some extra sessions, but this will be around like 20, 25 sessions.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
20 lessons covered base skills for automation testing or not?
Yeah, those are basic skills. And that's really, we'll have like packed exercise, I can tell you. It's packed time. So I really recommend you practice. Again, there's no other way, frankly speaking. I was looking at different options. I tried, every class I slightly changed a bit, you know, just to find what's, okay, this is something work better, not better. And it's still, the way it works best if you just focus on really, really basic stuff that you really need to get a job. So that's what majority of time would be spent, but it still will be complicated. But that will give you a junior developer job, which you can take from there, and you can really move later. Then you get the job, you learn forward. So you have so in terms of the goals, by the way.
My goal is my goal.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just saying to you guys, in terms of your goals for this class, it's important, right?
Yeah.
Your goal might be to find a job. That's one goal. In automation, right? That's pretty much my expectation from you. For that goal, you have to do practice. I already mentioned. The second goal may be that you already have a job, let's say as QA engineer, and you might want to switch towards automation. And maybe there are automation teams in your current, companies, and if you do a good job as QA engineer, normally if you come to your manager and say, I would like to be involved in automation, normally they give you that opportunity. That's more soft transition. I mean, if you're really in a good, if you do a good job as QA, they normally would do that, assuming there's, of course, opportunity. Sometimes there's opportunities. Then you have to look outside. But for some of you, it may be also good to try it that way, so you can have more smooth transition. So you learn some skills, you try to use at work, and then eventually you be more ready, right? If you start that transition, so you'll have some part-time in automation, real job. That's important. And sometimes for some of you, you want to, I mean, if you don't practice, you just say, okay, then my goal is just going to learn a bit how this works. So I'm not looking for a job. I just want to learn a bit how this works. I might be able to be more successful for, when automation runs, I know what's happening, CI/CD is out there, right? Or I'm asked to write some scenarios like in basic automation code. I'll talk about what that means. So I'll be ready. So today, QA engineer is not anymore manual QA engineer. So there's just QA or functional QA, and that assumes some involvement, launching tests, looking at reports, and so on and so forth. Again, that may be also a goal for some of you. I'm just setting expectations. If you don't practice, that will be your goal. But if you want to really find a job, you have to plan for practice. So, okay, that's the logistics. Any other questions?
Yeah, are we going to cover any API automation?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're going to cover API. I'll talk about the plan, and definitely REST API automation is going to be in the second half. So essentially, what we want to learn is basic locators. You're going to learn how to work with and find those locators, how to, that's critical to start. Then you're going to learn basic automation, UI automation with WebDriver, Selenium WebDriver. Then you're going to switch to page object pattern. So then you organize the code in a way, that's an important switch. Organize the code in a way that you can really write quality code, that's reliable code. And then we go to REST API, which is already object-oriented. So your knowledge on page object in WebDriver would allow you to do proper REST API automation. And that's pretty much our scope will be for the class.
So we will be able to, we'll be learning about mobile application automation as well.
For mobile, you have to double time in the class. So you do have, I think there is a mobile classes out there but in my mind, you should first learn basic automation before go to mobile, because it's essentially, if you talk about Appium, for example, right? That's often used. It's using WebDriver interface. So you should know WebDriver API so
Okay.
that you can do IPM better, right? And it has also like different other frameworks like XCUI test for iOS. There is also like different frameworks for Android.
Mhm.
But the first step is WebDriver.
Okay.
I mean, it's not really necessary first step, right? But the market for web automation is much bigger right now than
Okay.
mobile. So it would make only sense to start with that and then you go there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Quick question. Are we gonna use an existing framework, or one of the things I wanted to see is like, how to set it up, properly from from the very beginning, I guess.
Sure, yeah. I think what you're gonna do, normally, here's how it works. Right? So this is the role for, so the goal to essentially, some of you will be a bit more advanced than others, right? You will be able to advance more. And definitely the speed of this class will depend on overall group performance. So I'm gonna look at your homework solution and then adjust the speed, basically. And I'm also gonna send you quizzes. I'm gonna send first quiz after today also. But basically the point is that based on that initial advance, you'll have some different level, right? But again, my goal is to get you to basic level. That's the first step. So when you have a basic level, you join a team, you don't write framework. Nobody would allow you simply to do that, okay? You join and there's already a lot of code. In your skill is not to create a framework, which is a skill set for senior automation QA or architect or senior QA. Your job would be as an intermediate or beginner to actually be able to learn it fast, right? Understand how it works. And that's why page object very critical, because the majority of frameworks written that way. And look at how code written and just do as is done by others. In Rome, do as Romans do. And you look at the patterns that you use, you basically copy paste the code, change it for your scenario, make it work. That's the best initial beginner can do. And that's what I expect, because if you come and start inventing your frameworks or your approaches or whatever, right, it will be bad practice. So people normally, unless you're professional, unless you're a senior QA and you ask to do so, that normally nobody wants. Now, having said that, at the same time, I personally believe that to be able to be a successful automation engineer, you need to be a bit more advanced, like a little bit, like take a step forward. So in the second half of the class, we'll have one exercise where we create simple framework, but from scratch. So at least you know how it works. Also, by the way, after today, I'm going to send you an instruction. So you'll install framework and we'll finish next class. But you follow the instruction step by step. You should do it at home, like download whatever needed, install, configure, and you ask questions in the chat of Slack, like tomorrow, day after tomorrow, before next class, basically. So my point is that you're going to download a very basic framework, pretty much almost empty, and I'll review the structure of it. And then you're going to, our class is going to be based on that framework, and you're going to add more, add more, and more. And essentially the framework that we start with and the end with is completely two different ones, because it'll have so much more advanced. So this is also kind of creation of framework over 20 sessions. So we're going to initially start with basic WebDriver, then we're going to add object-oriented approach, then we're going to add REST API, and then so on and so forth. So this is pretty much like we're going to spend 20 sessions. And one of those 20, we're going to spend also separate, like to just do, okay, complete zero. Like if you want to just do like from nothing to a base automation framework with JUnit or TestNG, doesn't matter. That's what you also learn, okay? So that's, to answer your question, we're going to do it the right way over 20 sessions. And we're going to do it also kind of educational way from scratch, one session for it. We're going to do it towards the end. So yeah, I think you at least understand better, right? But if you just do it right now, you will not get anything at all. So you should do this basic one at the end so you have more context. Any other questions?
Slava, if you don't mind asking, you were mentioning that we're going to take 20 classes. So after how many classes we might be like comfortable in terms of applying for, let's say, beginning automation positions? Like after how many classes, in your opinion, like we might have? I know like as much experience as needed, that's for sure. But like after how many classes we can say, yeah, let's go and try ourselves and apply to
Sure.
automation positions.
Yeah, that's also very important, by the way. It's also part of exercise. You know, like I was doing back in Moscow. I was taking communication class, and there was a psychologist who drove it. And part of the class, he said, you go to subway and ask the stupid questions, people. And it was really uncomfortable. I can tell, very uncomfortable. And as part of exercise, you should go to the kind of street and question people. And some people like, you know, like just look at you like you're stupid, and you are asking some weird questions. And this is basically exercise to kind of go out of zone of comfort. That's the only exercise. You go out of the zone of your comfort. You know, people get a bit of fun, right? So that's okay. And you learn a bit, and you have to get through that exercise. So to answer your question, you would never get comfortable to going to interview, no matter how much skillful you are. That's true. You never get comfortable because it's always like people gonna, you know, evaluate you. Nobody likes like being evaluated, right? Nobody. So the tricky part here is just you kind of get the muscle a bit. So you kind of go out of the zone of comfort and you start learning, right? So, and what I recommend is that around the middle, around like session 10, I recommend you start going to interviews and try it, because that's also part of exercise. Why is it important in the middle? Because you're still learning, right? No matter how much motivation you have right now, it's still not going to be enough. Like if you just say, yeah, I'm going to, you know, wait for a whole class to finish, and I'm going to practice more and more and more, you never get to it. So you should really start going to interview middle of the session, because the way the mind works, that you should go somewhere, you should try something, fail, and only then you learn much faster. So that's how you build. You have to go to try something, we fail, we feel uncomfortable, and then our brain kind of tune up to do it very successfully. So it's kind of like it's just the way it works. The build you enable for yourself for faster learning, basically. Like even that may sound stupid, that's how this works. So you try something, you fail. So my point is that you go to interview. It's okay to fail at the interview. I will recommend to take some interview like outside of your state, right? Like there's a lot of remote jobs right now. You can just try it for practice. If you're not taken, it's okay, right? I actually had also I have driven a lot of interviews, like, you know, hundreds of interviews. And I have, so, I mean, I've met people like person said, okay, you know what, I just wanted to get your feedback, like how I do interview. I didn't expect you to take me for a job. I had people like that, and that's totally fine with me, right? That's okay, right? You don't need to say it that way, of course, but I mean, that's at the end of the interview, of course. But you can go for practice, and if you get an offer, it's great, right? I mean, it's like surprise. But I would expect you start going to interviews, and it's again out of your comfort, around the middle, like maybe 10, 12 session ahead. So that's what I would expect you to go, and you would not get invited right away. Of course, it'll take time. And then eventually you get invited, and then you would ask questions, right? I'm really happy if you can share with the group your questions you've been asked to. That will help others as well. And you know what to learn in this course, right? When you ask questions. Part of interview also going to be coding sessions. And I'll also give you, we actually have separate, I think, coding class, because it's really specialized. But I'm going, so around the second half also, I'm going to start giving you some exercise, very simple ones, and then we go slow, harder, more complicated ones as we go. And that will be more complicated exercises that you're gonna go over. And that's also part of that, right? And again, if you go to interview, you'll have crazy complicated sometimes, even that you're super experienced. It would not make any sense, right? It doesn't mean if you don't solve them, you would not get a job. So if you solve some, right, or because if it's really bad exercise, nobody would solve it. Your competitors who also apply also would not solve it. Market now is crazy. So it's really high chance you get a job. So it's a good time to look for a job. It's a seeker market right now. So it's really a shortage of good engineers, not enough. And that's why it's a good time, right? So that means that you have a really good chance. It doesn't mean you're successful from first attempt. You still have to go through it. So, but you have to start about session 12.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, Slava.
Hey.
Hi, I have a question about like language preferences from the market point of view between Java and Python. Would you please light on that?
Well, so it's a religious wars about it, right? So if there's, I mean, if you ask me, any language is good. There is a market for each of them. I would say right now, what I see more market for Java right now. Why? Because more developers in Java. Python guys mostly now is like AIML, like it's you know, a lot of libraries are about AIML on Python. You know, the data science, neural networks, machine learning algorithms. Those are Python stuff. But there's, I mean, Python is a bit more simple. If you ask personal opinion, I like both languages, and for beginner, I think Java is more beneficial. Why? Because it's kind of more low-level language than Python. You have to, it's more like, you know, strongly typed language, or you have to define a type, so you understand more about internal how it works. So it's a bit more complex syntax, but it's not that. Once you get used to it, it's okay. So I personally think it's better start in Java, and then you can easily switch to any other language.
Okay,
It
thank
also
you.
works the other way. You know, like I know a person who was writing in Ruby, working as automation in Ruby, had no idea about Java. I was working in Ruby for like a couple of years, and then like after a couple of weeks, found a job in Java. So it's in automation, it's much easier to switch languages than in development, because in development, each language is just the beginning, right? It's a lot of technologies, libraries, approaches. Where in automation, you have WebDriver, it's pretty much same command in every single language. So it's much easier, so you don't worry about it. So Java is good for to start. In markets, a bit bigger in Java right now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. So I think it's good time. So I want to.
Sorry, one more quick question.
Okay,
Sorry,
okay.
Slava. About back to logistics. Sorry, the controversial moment about the camera policy. You like we have cameras off right now, but it's a little bit hard
There's
to
no
perceive
policy
information.
about there's no policy camera off. Just that connection is better. Have issues if the video is off.
You think so?
No policy like that. I mean, it's just.
I don't know about people. I think it's like harder to perceive information if you like don't see anybody. So your opinion about that, and is it like intentional?
I think given the remote, that's for beneficial of good quality sound and a good connection around that. That's the reason for it, essentially. Okay, so let's go with the history, guys. That's important. So you have some initial understanding how it started. And essentially, automation is really relatively young, disciplines younger than QA. And initially, of course, developers expected to do everything, right? And then it's kind of funny that initially developers was doing everything themselves. And then separation happened. And now after separation happened, now we're kind of getting back a bit. So QA now expected not only do functional tests, but also automation, right? And developers not only expected to do development, but also DevOps. It's kind of interesting times. So we're kind of going in cycles, but nonetheless, there is no such discipline until we got Jason Huggins. And I know, like, this is, by the way, one of the old conferences. So I can see, I don't have a more quality picture, sorry. But you can see guys have some fun. So which one is a creator of Selenium? What do you think? Left or right?
I guess right.
The right one.
Yeah,
Yeah, right one.
you're the guy, right? Okay. Yeah,
Selenium was created by the group of programmers, not
Yeah.
only one person.
Actually, it was one person who created it, Jason Huggins, initially 2004. So he was working in ThoughtWorks, and has a famous pose like posture. So he's like right now actually looking at this. So he done it in 2004. And one thing that really happened with that, and the reason for its success, is that it was given to the community. A lot of frameworks were written in the companies, and they stayed in company, it died there, because they were closed code, proprietary. Like QTP, for example, you may have heard about it. Nobody knows about it right now. It was renamed, rebranded, but it's still, nobody uses it. Where Selenium, he basically created this and then he gave it away, right? And another guy later, actually 3 years later, he created, so he claimed it was in parallel WebDriver. So he was really kind of learned about it, but he said, yeah, I can do it better. So Simon Stewart, and he's more kind of visible guy than Jason, even though Jason did create it initially. But Simon just a lot of, he has a really good speaker. He speaks right now in automation conferences, very, very talented guy. So of course he take more stage for himself because natural, he's just has talent for it. And he created WebDriver. And then essentially, nobody knows about this guy, but it was even hard to find his picture, but he actually created a grid. So Philippe Hangrio, and as another part of the team later, again, 1 year later. So it's like one person created this one person created this one, kind of parallel. And this is another ability to run. So grid is basically ability to run, execute tests of Selenium WebDriver. And they merged essentially together. And then that's why you hear Selenium WebDriver together. Okay, so Selenium 2.0 that was merged as a one product. Still open source, still a community does it. This is open source technology. So how was basically it's used, right? So and what was the timeline? So initially there was times that developers did it, right? Like those guys were all developers. They did it to help themselves really with their work. And eventually, clearly there's separate engineers, automation engineers that were separated from developers that only do automation, nothing else. Then we have also more complex constructions here. So we have development itself, right? There's an integration. There's continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD. We also have QA automation engineers who just automate test cases. And we have QA engineers who right now also expected, and different companies work differently, by the way. So sometimes it's done by automation engineers, sometimes QA engineers, sometimes QA engineers also writing but simpler code and so on and so forth. But more often than not, QA engineers expected to be able to execute, launch automated test. And then once it's finished, take a look at it and confirm, is it a bug or it's false positive? And so basically that's called finding a root cause. What's the reason, right? So it's essentially why it's failed. You don't care if it's green, nobody looks at it with green, right? But if it's red, it's not necessarily a bug. It may be flaky test. So that's expectation, QA engineers do it. And a lot of skill set you're going to learn here is also help you in this category. Now, we also have right now a lot, it's kind of now today is a best practice really. It's not anymore like an innovation. They're called BDD, Cucumber, Gherkin. Some of you maybe heard about it. So that's implementation of BDD, specific tools for BDD. So there's initially we had test-driven development. Now we have behavior-driven development. I'll talk about difference and what it means. So essentially, as we start today, on the market, as we stand on the market, we have QA engineers, sometimes also expected to write automation. A separate title for QA automation engineer that sometimes, by the way, do manual work also. It's kind of interesting. So there's interchangeable. And we have also is DAT. So normally this one is really true automation, pure automation, if you like it. So it's SDT stands for Software Development Engineer and Test. So those are three roles that you might go and look. So probably junior is that you'll look at for QA automation engineer and QA engineer. Those are three buckets. Any questions? All right. So essentially, how do you run it? Like, where do you run automation also? Okay, you have automation history, how it's created. You have also different categories of engineers, right? And something you can focus and target for. And this one is now, where do you use it? Where do you use automation? And to understand where do you use it, you need to understand the life cycle of the software, right? It's essentially simple. That's related normally to environments, right? So it's places where it is located, so you can really focus automation on it, point to it basically, right? And get result. And initially you build, as a developer, you do it on your own machine. Okay. So essentially built on dev computers. And then we have special environment that's separated to only access internal. So you don't have access to it like a Facebook, for example. They have a QA.facebook.com. They might have multiple environments. They might have like 50 environments. That's all QA. So internal, each of those environments has different product in them. Small project or bug fix, whatever. So let me show you really better to do it on this. So you have so this is your dev computers. Right? So those are just computers that you write software. So that's, you just develop some code, right? And this is called dev environment normally. Today with the cloud that is standard now, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure. Sometimes dev also called is actually inside of AWS. So it's not, it's kind of QA, but so it's basically the modern software, sometimes so complicated. So it cannot just fully run on one machine anymore. However, the piece of it still runs on local computers, still testable, the unit of it, basically. That's what unit test is for, right? You still can do tests of each piece of software, and that's done by developers. And that's a dev environment, normally dev computer. And then you get it deployed, called deployment on QA, where you have some new project. For example, some time ago, Facebook introduced like new smiles, right? They used to have only like thumbs up, but now you have like a number of emojis, right? So you have different ways to react. And that was initially like just deployed to QA, right? So you have a production, Facebook, and it's prod. And then you have basically the QA environment. So QA environment only for engineers access. So there's no people have access to that environment beyond internal QA engineers. So, but production is for everyone to use, right? So if it's a software that is enterprise software, essentially it's not for regular consumers, it's for other companies, enterprises. That's pretty much the access, right? So they have some financial software, they have some HR software, they have a lot of different domains, essentially. That software is for, it's all production anyway, right? So they're just, instead of regular consumers, it's just other companies for consumers, your clients. So this is what is it, right? So essentially, initial first step is local development. The second one is QA. What happens next? Let's say you have QA environment, right? With some project. The project being delivered. How does it work? You have QA environment. How long does it take for you to really certify some change or new project? Some of you who work QA engineers, how long does it take?
Refresh the page.
Huh? What's that?
Refresh the page. It depends on how big the project is. We
Exactly,
need
right.
to.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. How often do you release? Let me ask this question. How often do you have a release cycle?
Once in a quarter.
Once a quarter, okay.
We have once in 2 weeks.
Once 2 weeks. Okay, that's
Yeah, we have 2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks.
Sprint. 2 to 3 weeks sprint.
2 to 3 weeks. You release potentially every single sprint, right? Really production, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's more often, right? It used to be like once in 6 months.
2 times a week.
Yeah, 2 times a week. It's also possible. So like the smaller companies, faster it must be to survive. And in general, the trend that brought by startups, because they're really fast, right? They are really, to be able to compete, they just faster and they use like managed solutions that are packaged. So they're faster and they do more often releases basically. So we used to have like once in 6 months, switch to once per 3 months and so on and so forth. So now the common practice, I'm just talking about the market. What I hear is once a month, it's now a standard. Once per 2 weeks is more often than not a standard. Normal sprint length is 2 weeks, recommended. There's also 1 week sprints, but people burn out and that's kind of too fast. So 1 week too fast, probably 2 weeks is reasonable. And normally you should be able to release something every single sprint. So that's many companies operate like that. Some companies operate every 2 weeks. Sorry, every 2 sprints to release. That means monthly. So that's why let's do it 2 weeks, for example, right? 2 week cycle, 1 sprint. So how long does it take, do you think, to really, let's say if a small project, potentially maybe, but by the way, it doesn't mean that you every single project every 2 weeks, right? You might have a project that takes several months, like 6 months project. It just doesn't mean that you release, but you should be able to release. You release bug fixes, small changes. So you basically be able to release. Okay, that's what it means, release every 2 weeks. If there's no need, you don't release, but you have a window, right? And there's, of course, something always happens, like small changes on. It's good because the more changes you do, it needs more automation. Automation more required, right? So it means more jobs created. That means more jobs for you guys, because it's not really possible to do every 2 weeks releases if you don't have automation. It's only possible if you have automation, or you don't care about quality of your software, of course, but it's all essentially automated, including deployment of the code, right? So let's say developers done with the code, a click button, and what happens, it gets pushed to QA environment. As it pushed to QA environment, a lot of things happening also. It's not just a simple, go ahead and do it. So it's essentially, before it goes to QA, developers test manually. Now, also every single code change, there are unit tests happening. So whenever software ready for QA, it must be tested by developer, number 1. It must be unit tested, number 2. And unit test in a way it's kind of regression test. Well, it's not really regression. So it's unit test. Let's put it that way. So don't confuse me with terminology. So unit test essentially is developers testing code testing code normally. And there are a lot of other tests going on, like security, static analysis. Essentially, at this level, majority of tests are around, code testing code basically. That's what this is mostly happening. However, whenever you deploy it, right after it's deployed, before QA jump in, do you think it makes sense to run automation at this level?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Because first it should be tested manually and then we can automate those tests.
So you're talking about the new features. I'm talking about, let's put it this way. So let's imagine that you're using Facebook, right? And you use thumbs up because you don't care, like you use like only, right? Let's say there's let's say Facebook, at the time they initially rolled it out, some people didn't like it. You only had initially in Facebook, you only can do like, right? Thumbs up, that's it, or dislike. That's very much they had. But then they introduced like different emotions, right? You have angry, happy, laugh, whatever, right? They have a lot more. And they still kept also thumbs up. Some people didn't care about like other emojis. They only had, okay, I like it or not like it. Okay. So whenever, let's say this is something deployed to Q environment, can it break the normal standard like?
Yes.
For example, you cannot do it anymore. You can only do like heart, sell the heart or be angry, but you cannot anymore do normal like. Like if you were a regular user of Facebook who you get used to it, what would you be unhappy if it breaks your normal behavior that you get used to, or some new feature that is introduced is not working yet? What makes you more unhappy?
But they can deploy to prod also the whole thing, but just hide it behind the feature flag.
Yeah, but my question is different, right? I'm asking you, what makes you unhappy if your software you get used to, whatever functionality you already get used to broken,
Yeah, that previous
versus
features
something new broken?
don't work. You need to make sure that nothing got broken and the previous features to test. Like it makes sense to automate right away.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, if there is some user who get used to like or dislike, and Facebook releases something to production, like new emotions, new different ways to like, 5 different options now instead of 1. Some people just didn't care. I mean, they say like, why is it needed? And who wants it initially, right? Now people get used to it. It's a different story. But people initially said like, who needs this? I don't need this, right? Imagine if it's breaking your normal way. People will be really angry, right? And the point is what I'm saying, that whenever you introduce a new feature, you should, as Q engineer, you want to make sure that the normal functionality that used to be before the change working also. Let's say you introduce a new visual. Would you test also the old way, how it used to be? It's supposed to be still available, right? What kind of test is it?
Regression.
Regression.
Exactly. So regression test is something that used to work, new feature introduced. It may be around the same functionality, like dislike, right? Or it may be completely unrelated, but still can impact. Potentially, you never know how code connected. If you're a key engineer who works a long time, you might even know if something introduced in some area, it might impact other area, but you don't have so many people. People a lot of move right now between jobs, right? So it's rarely person works many years at one company. At least majority of people move a lot. So the point is that I'm saying that you have to test the functionality you get used to, not necessarily the ins and outs, right? And that's where automation comes in. So whenever you deploy a new feature, you want to make sure that all functionality, regression is working fine. So there's no regression bugs, basically, okay? So regression bugs are the bugs that you break something in the original software that used to work, essentially by introducing some changes. It may be a new feature, it may be a bug fix, it may be whatever, like accidental change, doesn't matter. So regression bug is breaking something that's used to work. Okay, it's not about new feature. Let's say if you introduce a new feature and it's not functional, people won't be much angry with that because it's okay, right? So essentially, people don't, it's a bad impression, of course, right? It's never really bad impression of the product, but it's less impact than something that you get used to stops working. Let's say financial software, right? I'm making a report, financial report every time, right? Let's say the new feature introduced, I don't know, fiscal years, for example, right? So I can now define my custom fiscal year instead of calendar year. If you break a calendar year report, that's a huge, big difference, right? It's a P1 bug maybe, right? Not working. If you some new feature introducing, it's not yet working. It's rarely it's a severity one, rarely. So what I'm saying is that automation can really help, number one, with regression test, because you have it already done for some functionality being released, last release or a month ago or a year ago, and you continuously run same set of test cases because you never have time to verify them, right? So that's what I said. When you deploy something new, you as Q engineer focus on new tests, right? And you don't really have time to retest the whole software. And you expect it to, by the way, that's your job, to retest every single one. But reality, you just don't have time to. So you prioritize, right? Sometimes people do very, very bad prioritizing, and it's not working at all, break everything. So, and automation can help with that because automation doesn't judge, it doesn't prioritize. Basically, you just wrote something, you think everything is covered, everything is important, and you make sure it's all green. If something breaks, then you look at what's broken and rerun manually those sets of test cases that broken. And then you ask automation engineers to fix yourself. If you are an automation engineer or if you expect it to do so. So that's what happens at this level, really important at the deployment to QE, even before you start testing software change. And again, it may be just bug fix, not necessarily new feature, or maybe a new feature. You want to make sure a test run before when you jump in. And that's how we call different tests. We call them smoke tests. We call them acceptance tests. Sometimes we call build acceptance test. And I mentioned already regression tests. All of this are part of delivery. So if you look at those categories, this is basically different categories of tests. It's not like testing pyramid here, but it's just overall smoke. That's one, right? There's acceptance. Another one. And there's regression. Another one. So those three categories that you work with. And those are not even about the new features that's been written. It's just you have this set of tests to verify that nothing that used to work is impacted by a change. Make sense?
I'm so sorry, Slava. We are still seeing some kind of paint here, not a presentation. Maybe you tell us about the smoke testing.
Yeah, maybe it's not updating. One second.
The paint. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make sure. Let me know if you can see the screen. You see?
Yes, we see.
Good.
I can see.
Let me just clear out a bit.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, so essentially you have so the three categories. So smoke is one, acceptance second one, or build acceptance. Sometimes say BAT, right? Build acceptance test. You can call sometimes sanity test. Sometimes people call it sanity. It's the same. It's a different communities call it differently. And then there's regression. So I'm talking about those categories because they're applicable to automation specifically. So what's the difference? So let's say something is deployed to QE environment. So what do? What do you expect to run first, second, and third, and why?
First, we're gonna run acceptance test.
Okay.
To make sure it is ready for QA. Then we can do smoke to make sure nothing like big broken, and then we do regression to verify everything was what was working before is still working, and then we can test the new functionality, I think.
So normally more often than not, smoke is smaller subset, not
it just
bigger. So do you think it makes sense to run bigger subset first and then smaller? Let's say smoke is broken. Do you like how fast it is broken, or you want to run like a lot of tests first?
No, that's why we run smoke. We don't want to spend time.
Yeah,
we don't want to spend time on like a lot of test cases, and finally I realized that it's broken, something small broken.
Yeah, exactly. So you just said you run acceptance first and smoke. That's why I mentioned that.
Oh,
so you run smoke first because it's a smaller subset. Nothing is smoking basically. And again, it's not really like you can guarantee this time, right? By definition, smoke must be short. It cannot be running a long time because you want to fast find something, right? Something smoking, you want to find fast. So you want to spend time to it, right? If it's something broken, you want to find about it as soon as possible. So normally smoke tests are, like around 5 minutes or so, okay? And then if it's successful, that's a really simple test that maybe verifying, probably like it's verifying logging, and you end up on some dashboard, right? It's some different basic pieces of software working correctly, and smoke. Then it's good. Then you go with bigger subset of tests, which is acceptance or build acceptance. Normally, how long does it run? What do you think?
I would say 15, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you're right. But like, let's put the max at 30 minutes. Up to 30 minutes. Depends on how long, how big is coverage, how big is software, but it should not be more than 30 minutes or so. I mean, ideally, you say, as you said, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. And then how long can regression take?
On my project, it's taking 1 hour and a half.
1 hour and a half, yeah. So essentially, maybe
2 to 3 hours.
Few hours, maybe even 1 day, depends on coverage. Actually, like today, especially that's around the run, by the way. 1 week. Like, how do you guys release every 2 weeks? You need to wait 1 week, right? So essentially, there's one, yeah. So there's a bucket of software that goes out, right? Like this, right? If you do test like that, let's say it takes 1 week. You can take 1 week of tests and just parallelize them, okay? Say 1 week of tests, right? So essentially you can have 10 threads and then it's now only like, I don't know, 15 hours. It's 10 threads. So there is a way to run tests in parallel. Of course, you want to make sure it's possible to do so. You have like user accounts that can log in parallel, so on and so forth. It should have some pre-configuration. But that's also where automation is going to. So you can have you take a long test, you run it in parallel, you get result. Okay. So that's something that's happening here. But yeah, so regression essentially I don't even put time for it, but ideally it should not be more than 1 day. And ideally it should be around probably 3-4 hours. Probably put this. Max time. If it's real time, then you would do parallel. You must do parallel if you want to get fast feedback. You don't want to wait 1 day for give it result, right? Okay, because it's a little bit. Let's say it runs 1 day, it found a bug. You want to again do some change, right? If you make change, you have to again rerun the whole suite. Again, you wait 1 day. There's no way you can run, you can deploy in every 2 weeks if that's slow tests around. So you have to find a way to do something parallel, essentially prioritize it. Go ahead, question.
Slava, in between smoke and acceptance testing, I believe there are the unit testing, integration, and system testing. Am I correct? Like, do we do something about these?
Yeah, so this is like, so there's unit tests here. So unit tests can be lightweight and heavyweight. Heavyweight normally are integration tests. So those are normally developer written tests where they verify like different components talk to each other. So it's still like a subset of unit testing. Okay.
So automation doesn't do any unit test?
This is part of CI/CD process. Automation, no, it doesn't do unit tests. You kind of confuse. So there's a different automation. There's automation, it's called QA automation, number one. There's automation of the process, deployment process. It's also automation. There's no relation to QA whatsoever. It's just automation of deployment, automation of rollout, and so on and so forth. So don't confuse it. We're talking about QA automation. For QA automation, we have normally 2 categories. Category number 1 is a UI, very important one from user perspective. Category number 2, REST API, faster, more reliable. But and again, there's a lot of things we can talk about it. I don't want to go right now. But I would say 2 main categories of types of tests. On development side, before you even jump in, there are unit tests. They also have categories, right? They have a lightweight, which is pure unit test, and they have heavy, which are integration tests. And those are normally done by developers. There's no automation involvement at this point. So this is this category talking about, okay? Different types of unit tests. And there's also, of course, static analysis. So that's verified by development. You write the code. There are some tools that automatically check, like Caverity, for example, or SonarQube, or there's different basically validators, so ready solutions to go. popular in the market. You deploy it, you run it. There are also as well code reviews. So this is not really automated, but it's part of checklist, right? You want to make sure the code that's done by developer is in good shape. The ticket you are validating, you can also look it up, by the way, as QA, just to see how many changes done. Some QA do it. If you know a bit of code, it will be super helpful to understand a bit better. So there's a lot of checks going on before it goes to QA. But if you talk about automation, from development side is unit tests, integration tests. From QA side, UI tests, REST API tests. But then the time difference and some set of tests are different. Smoke, acceptance, regression. Smoke and acceptance is part of regression in a way, really. Regression just run hours, many hours, where smoke acceptance, some subsets to get result fast. So you don't wait like 5 hours to get result, right? Or 1 day, as some of you said, like a long time. So you want to wait 5 minutes and say something is really broken. You want to wait like 30 minutes or around that to say some component not working. So you can really give feedback for developers. Make sense? So before you do manual tests in QA, you get a lot of things going on, including you can get feedback from automation. So to summarize, we have on QA environment, we have a lot of tests going on. And let me get back to screen. So you basically have different categories of automation run on QA environment. So here's what we have on QA, right? Those are different categories. There is also one more so-called feature-based automation scripts. That's a new feature. And that's something that teams who release fast, they started to get used to. Essentially, if it's a project that takes, I don't know, 2 months to get out at the door, right? You still have like a release window every 2 weeks. But this particular project will stay in QA environment, separate environment maybe, being tested for 2 months, because that's a big project, right? You plan for it. Essentially, 2 months means it's 4 sprints, right? In this case, and as the sprint goes, right? Once you test and certify new features, you can also automate them before release. So let's say you finish sprint 1, you have in sprint 1 something certified. As you do sprint 2, you can automate whatever was done in sprint 1. So when you're done with sprint 2, you also test together sprint 1 features, so on and so forth. So that some teams make part of delivery, agile definition of done. You say, I can close the story if, say, there's no bugs, right? So everything is done, there's no bugs, and also signed up by product owner. So that's precondition to close. So definition of done, right? And also you can have definition of done. It's also automated. Some teams do that. That is more often than not, it's moved to next sprint normally. So it's not automated right away. It's automated right after it's done, the following sprint. Okay, so that's normal, the process, how things done out there. So essentially you have, if you have 2-month releases, have 4 sprints, right? It's at this point, you've delivered software. So what you want to make sure you run every time you deliver and push something, you run regression, right? And you also want to cover new features. Let's say by end of sprint 1, you have nothing new features. By the time sprint 2, maybe a separate team who just works on automation. Let's say you have a team who works on development, right? You're part of the team. But there's also automation team that you have their own sprint. So whatever accepted in sprint 1 here goes into backlog automation team. Okay, so as you come to the end of sprint 2, they also have some automation scenarios, which part of new features. So once you deploy and move forward, you also have some new features that been done previous sprint. So you have some new features. Those are new features for a customer, right? Because they don't know this product yet. So, but you want to make sure you run regression because that's what customer get used to. It's existing functionality, but you also will help yourself a lot with the quality of new product when you automate new features also before release. So as was said on the call, you cannot do it before you check action, right? You cannot just automate nothing, right? So you deploy it, you test it, of course, manually, right? It's accepted, but maybe part of that test, as you write tests, you also write automation. Some teams, they don't write manual tests at all. They just write automation tests. And you ask, okay, how is it possible? Where do you run it? If you don't run automation, it's not possible, right? Well, you do run automation as an engineer. You do run manual tests as automation engineer. To be able to write automated tests, you have to manually go through this, right? And that's how you manually test also and find bugs. So it's also manually tested by product owner, like UI is good, right? So QE accepted, but then it must be also tested by product owner and so on and so forth. What really is a gap? So whatever new in the sprint normally tested well, but you basically, what often happens, something here breaks. So it's kind of internal regression, right? So there's a regression in relation to production. And there's regression that something that's been closed as a story now broken by changes done in the following sprint here, okay? So you do something here and you break something that was done here because you changed something, right? Or maybe even not relational directly, but it always happens. So we'll talk about different types of bugs, and especially when you talk about REST API. But the point is that you do a lot of breaks. You write new software, right? And that's where automation can be super helpful in new features that just introduced. And again, next time you move to next screen, right? You're here. So now new features taken from here, right? You also cover. So essentially there's another sprint that everything is done from this moved here, right? And then you automate it. And then essentially when you deliver result of sprint 3, your new features backlog now contains changes from 2 sprints. Make sense? That's if you have a good coverage, and that's how new companies operate. That's how, like Facebook, for example, put as a credo to operate as example. Any questions?
When does those like new features are becoming part of the regression tests?
Okay, exactly, good question. So you have, let's say, I mentioned this 2-month project, right? So that's sprint 4. Now sprint 4, you also cover new features previous sprint, right? And essentially, as you deliver this and you go to staging, right? This is also automated because it's next sprint, like final test. And essentially every single new, like once you go to production, this just becomes regression and it's merged with regression. That's how you basically expand your regression. Make sense? And there's 3 categories of tests that normally written by automation. First is maintenance. Something always breaks, you have to fix it. That's part of your daily job. Second is existing backlog, production backlog. Basically expanding regression, okay? And new features. So of course, it's pretty tight. Normally you have like 3 different streams. Like someday you take 1, someday you take 2, someday you take 3. So that's responsibilities of automation engineer. You maintain everything that's broken, you fix it. You automate more from regression, so it's covered better. That's critical. And as possible, normally it's the smallest backlog because many companies have a huge technical backlog to catch up. But as possible, this pretty like critical critical coverage for new features you also do. So, make sense?
How many automation testing can I have per day?
Well, it depends. Some companies do not measure this. Some companies do measure. And normally nobody measures if you do good. I mean, perception of your work is good. Nobody going to watch over your shoulder. You have to create that perception. It's really critical that you do it in the beginning. Like you invest in the beginning, people will be looking closely at, will not be looking closely at you later, okay? You kind of have a reputation and then you have to maintain it. And you have some kind of health, right, of that reputation that it can sustain a hit. But if it goes really badly, you're in trouble. But if you kind of, you recover, then you're okay. So you have to maintain that, of course, and you have to create a good impression. But expectation from the engineer, if you like, it depends on, it's really complicated to be honest, especially with the scenario outlines. When one scenario is covering like 10 different test cases, it becomes fuzzy. But you can think about like three test cases a week. That's something that I've seen in the market more often than not, reasonable. 3 reasonable test cases per week. 2, 3, I would say in that way. So that makes it like 1 test case in 2 days, like the whole life cycle. Not large one, reasonable size. So it's kind of medium. Small is so you can do like maybe twice, 2 per day. Large, you might take 1 scenario a week or around, I mean, 2 weeks. Sometimes they're large scenarios. Make sense?
My question is a real question. I have interview. Interviewer asked me, how many automation test cases can you have per day? I heard one test case. Oh, only one.
You know what? I can tell you this. A lot of questions on the interview, it's tricky questions, and they focus to crack you if you have experience, real experience or not. Okay, so if you never worked as an automation engineer and you ask this question, you have no idea, right? So and you usually be like bluffed, basically say, okay, it has. So if you really, that's why this class is about practice. You have to really participate and write, right? So you understand, you have a feeling, what is it about? So what's reasonable to cover, what's not, because you're going to write your scenarios, like your test cases. Okay, so if you ask an answer with confidence and explain, and not just say, okay, 1 or like, but you explain, depends on the size. Sometimes the small scenarios, you can have multiple of them. Sometimes there's a large scenario, you can have once per week. Sometimes there's like 3 times a week. Like in our case, we have around our engineers, we have pace of 3 scenarios per week, reasonable size with good quality. That's normal expectation from our management. So if you answer with confidence and you have experience proven by this, right? So nobody would question that. So it's sometimes like people ask really weird questions in the interview, like how do you make a migration from Python to Java framework? Like they ask a beginner. And sometimes questions just either checking your experience, number 1 category, or just checking your logic. And you're like, sometimes people on purpose try to get ground out of your legs, you know, like they try and really check your boundaries, how you behave emotionally also, how you sustain to stress. So sometimes like people test different things at the interview. So you should be ready for any kind of test. Sometimes people just have no idea how to run an interview. They're normal engineers, you know, like imagine you sitting, working, and your manager comes to your desk and say, you know what, interview someone right now. And you have some work to do, and you have no idea how to interview, right? If you have like 30 minutes until interview, what do? You Google interview questions. And then you have like really stupid questions sometimes, and you just ask them. Because you have no idea what else to ask, okay? So don't really think like it's sort of by the book or something. So people ask all kind of questions. That's why you really need to have multiple interviews, because sometimes you're really super prepared that you just don't take a job because it's like strange questions asked or strange interview you get to. We're all normal people, like we all make mistakes. Interviewers also make mistakes as well. So, okay, let's get back. So essentially, I was talking about this, right? So essentially, we talked that QA environment, you can see there's a lot of underground, right? But we have QA environment here. And let's finish this. So what happens after QA environment certified? Do you go to production right away?
Pre-prod
No,
environment.
no.
You don't. Why don't?
Pre-prod.
Yeah. There's another checkpoint. Normally it's called staging, or it's called pre-prod, as was told, right? And the reason for it, because normally people save on QA environments. It's really expensive, right? All this production environment is super expensive. So you don't want to pay the same money for internal environment versus production. So, and you kind of, right, you know, like right now you use Dockers also. Dockers became easier, but still sometimes things are a little bit different on production staging. Okay, but staging is, you can think about staging or pre-prod. It's like, sorry, I mean, I'm talking difference between production and QA. There should not be any difference between production and staging. That's the whole purpose. So staging or pre-prod is normally one of the kind of nodes of production that's really expensive, or is part of prod. And the reason for it, because you want to make sure that when you run a real production environment, nothing is broken. So normally on staging, there's some kind of bugs also happen. What kind of bugs, guys? What do you think? What kind of bugs?
Integration with the other services?
No, not really. Integration, you should test on QA. With all, well, something may be possible on staging, but if you test something on staging, it's bad, to be honest. Staging is not supposed to be for integration test. It's a final rollout.
Yeah, defect leak.
Yeah, so essentially configuration. So you can have, for example, different Java versions maintained by the code that's different on production and QA. And of course, staging is supposed to be the same as prod always. And sometimes there's different, you know, variations of configuration and yeah, integration. But again, integration must be tested in QA. But sometimes like production live integrations, people just don't want to pay money to make it work on QA. So they do final with staging. That's also possible. It's not a good solution though, by the way. But there is a number of tests that you still have to run on staging basically. And the question for you is, what kind of test do you run here? So here we run smoke acceptance regression. What new features also? What else do you run here?
Can I ask you a question as well here? Like, can the regression test be run on a staging?
Yeah, try first. Yeah, so you said you also run regression? That's my question.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I would think that regression could be run here, but
you're right.
I would say smoke.
System test cases.
For sure.
Well, you support, that's why I'm saying it's important that is your tests can be run in parallel and should take reasonable time, a few hours, right? I don't know, 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, but not like 1 day or 2 days, because you don't stay long on staging. It's a final validation, and you ideally run everything. You also run smoke right after deploy. You also run acceptance after smoke success. So you get feedback after like 30 minutes. And then you run regression also. So when you really go to prod, you look at green. Sometimes, by the way, the data that you work with, you cannot have real data in QA. It's legally not allowed. By the way, you cannot have either on the staging as well. But you can have some kind of sanitized data that cloned from prod or something, some kind of data sets that very expensive on QA, but you can have a reasonable kind of larger data sets on staging that like based on the product use or something. So on staging, you cannot have real data, but you can have some kind of larger sets of data that realistic, right? That you can check how this works, like performance-wise and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things you can do more, right? But real life on staging versus QA. So you essentially, ideally run on just same test against same different data sets and maybe production-like configuration. So ideally, you should have everything run on staging as well. Okay. So is that just shorter time frame? Maybe if it's 2 months project, then I don't know, like four sprints. It's actually 3 sprints. It's on QA, and the last sprint, the 4th sprint, is on staging. You can think about that way. Okay, so month and a half is on QA, done. Then for final test is 1 week on staging, and then you go to prod. Okay, so it takes 2 months total. So how about production? Do you test on production?
We do just superficial like smoke testing.
Yeah, so in production, you still run automation in production, but you don't run against real customer data. Of course, again, you never touch real customer data either case on any stage, but you have engineering environment, engineering accounts. That's your data with your data, and you run against those accounts. Okay, sample data you created. So that's pretty much it. And normally at this level, you don't run regression. As we said, you do normally smoke acceptance because it's kind of final, just normally verification of, okay, you know, things work well from that perspective. So production-wise, it's deployed. Normally, like issues that might be caught at this level is that just it did not deploy for some reason. Sometimes I've seen cases like when it's supposed to be deployed, but it's not. So it's supposed to be caught by automation, maybe REST API or something like that. So you check the version of deployed software and things like that. That's part of acceptance. Make sense? So bottom line is that you use automation everywhere. Even development can just run smoke. QA environment have all variety, smoke, acceptance, regression, new features. Here we have also same set of tests on staging. Of course, you test manually also. You verify manually result, something special red. And then the production, you go to prod, you also do an acceptance test on production. Smoke and acceptance. Again, you can have like just acceptance, right? That means smoke is just part of acceptance. So it doesn't need to be, it's just a logical tests that you do. You run just first very basic and then you expand. That's what I meant by the subset of tests. So that's pretty much what I want to say. So we look a bit of history, we looked about where do you run automation, what kind of tests are there, how potentially work can be set up. Let's talk about technologies now, and specifically technologies on this course. So we're going to focus on three. Number one, we're going to look into behavior-driven development. That's now a standard many companies use. Some only write test cases in BDD format. Number two, we're going to look into Java because our tests are written on Java, and we're going to look at that and write WebDriver in Java. And the library itself, basically, it's API means in this case not REST API. It means set of functions. Application programming interface just have set of functions to drive browser. What kind of functions? Click here, move mouse there, like this is basically that's what function is. Click, move element, drag and drop. That's example of WebDriver functions that exist. Any questions? All right. So initial intro, Cucumber, basically very popular. As I mentioned, it's implementation of BDD, and it's essentially just the English test cases, just specific format. That's very easy to automate. It's connected. Basically, this ability to connect the bullet point like sentences with the code, and also pass different arguments from it. Now Java, I think no need for introduction for Java, and that's why we learn it. And the WebDriver essentially is a very basic one, popular set of API. Essentially, that's like Alphabet, and a lot of like Appium or other solutions, they kind of base in WebDriver underneath. So for web applications, it's a must have knowledge. On JavaScript, a lot of new frameworks came in, like Protractor framework or WebDriver IO, similar one to WebDriver. There's a number of different solutions, but it's still important basic one, WebDriver. Then you can easily switch to any other framework if you want. So this is the most popular still framework. All right, so bottom line is that it's really important knowledge now. And even if you're not an automation engineer, you still expect it to run automation scripts, read reports. So the market is, as I said, seeker market, but expectations to seeker also heighten now. So you should do more than just be able to manually test. And as around automation, like you read the reports, you understand why it fails. You work closely to automation engineers to resolve some problems. And if possible, you contribute as well, meaning that you write tests. So that's expectation today from a regular automation engineer now. So what's going to be the coverage, a bit more deep dive? So we're going to start with simple Cucumber set tests, simple English sentences. So we get confident with Selenium WebDriver and its functions. Yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to, at some point towards the end, we're going to create from scratch the framework, focus on REST API in JSON format specifically. We also have framework supporting XML, but we're going to focus on JSON because that's the most popular. I mentioned Cucumber. I'll show like just high level Jenkins kind of pipeline. You're not going to look into Jenkins setup. It's a separate class. It's complicated. But I'm going to just show you how, like top of it, like basic kind of vanilla solution. You're going to use Git and learn a bit of Git and the branching, merging, and use Java, and of course, object-oriented programming. There's more stuff like that. Essentially, the coding challenges you'll look about, and I'll show you also some further investigation you can take ahead to practice. It's never enough for coding challenges, but there are some patterns of challenges that you get used to. So essentially, you become more comfortable. You never become really comfortable, but you comfortable enough to be able to get a job. So that's what's important. And part of the exercise, you're also going to interviews, as I mentioned. So that's part to go there and understand what they ask. Not just one place, because again, questions may be really weird from one place, but you have to go like to 5, 10 places. Then you have a trend and you have success. You also choose, by the way, not necessarily they choose you. If you have some skills, you will be choosing also which place is better. Because you're going to work there, you're going to spend a lot of time there, right? Learn there. So that's also important to find a good company. I'll show you also like how you can automate your own real project, like something that you just can do for your own real benefit. And normally find this kind of funny thing that, yeah, there's a questions, and I'll show you logging, high level, test context you're going to learn as well, like how do you load data from file. Normally you don't save much, to be honest, but the load, you can also run it out of the browser, things like that. There are also the bullets. So the ideal bullets you should write yourself. So if you do some job right now, right, I would recommend to go to your manager and say, you know what, I'm learning automation. I would like to, and if you allow me, can I do some automation of my task, right? I'm working on, basically. So, and you can actually practice with real, like day to day. You can also optimize your work. If you do some redundant tests all the time, you can automate that piece of code, right? With your framework. Just, again, there's the framework you use is open source, it's basic. There is nothing in it, so it's just a simple WebDriver. So you can, you basically can use it to go in and to automate your project at work. There is no issue at all with that, right? So just ask permission that you can work at your work, and that's something you really get extra experience for. And yeah, that's sometimes people just switch to that role in the job. This is an example of things that you like expected to format in that place. So normally, if you put your achievements, you need be specific, right? What do you do? So that's just example here. But again, you should put based on your work you're doing. And this course takes almost 3 months. So you'll have a chance to implement it at work, right? And, as you feel ready, probably around like 30% through the course. Okay, I want to actually have one example just to show you also. That's specific to automation, but here's an example what it looks like. Cucumber scenario. Just example. Let's say you're looking at something on Amazon like for collectible. Let's say the silver dollar. You want to look here, right? So it is a Cucumber format, is BDD scenario. It's just an example I want to show you this demo. Let's say you want to just do it yourself, right? But you don't want to check it yourself often manually. So you just write test and that's it. Of course, there's notifications exist in Amazon that you don't need to write test actually. But let's imagine there is no automation like that. So you can really write test and just have it run and look for you. So basically what it does is it goes into search, collectibles, searches for Morgan dollar, sets some filters, make sure as a time range I'm interested, the actual composition, it sorts by price, make sure it's $1. And then if price is lower $50, then it would email with result. Okay, so let me just prepare email, make sure it's ready to show you if it sends something. So I can share it in 1 second. So let's say I have some kind of result, and going to get back to the code base and show you this.
I'm not able to see your screen.
Yeah, I'm switching right now. Wait a minute, should be able to. So I'm going to run this. So you just right click and run. And you can see it runs, opens browser, goes to Amazon, searches, then it's supposed to set filters now, which it does. So there's several filters, sorting, it's supposed to change as well. So change the sorting, some kind of more filters. And then if it finds it below $50, and it sends them out. If I go to my email, so you can see I actually have something just received right now. And you can see there's something found, $47. And I can click on the link. And I can see that this is the one it found. Okay. If I don't like it, I can just copy paste this and just put here is exclusion. So it won't send it to me again. Okay. This example of automation that you can do just for yourself if you want as a demo. Okay, so let's do this. Let's have a break. Then we go through the next section and we'll go with the questions. If you have any other questions, any questions before the break?
I have a question. Can you open IntelliJ one more time?
Yep. What's up?
So basically, for example, when I search for where's the method, regular Java method, it's somewhere in other class?
Yeah, so that's how Cucumber works. As QA, you just write this, right? That's Cucumber, that's BDD. But you can see I use this step, it's called step. There's a key phrase. So this is context, means given I go somewhere, it's a context. Given I am administrator, given I do this, that, right? When it's an action. So you start this with action. So you search for something, you set filters. And this conjunction is like same as previous one, right? And
so Morgan,
that's verification. Now, to answer your question, you can see that those are tokens, right? Changeable. And this is really connected to the code. Here's the Java code.
And how do you can?
Yeah, that will be a purpose of our course to learn this. So we'll get there. But it's so essentially every single step here, I can click on it, and here I have a Java. Okay?
And do you connect just these methods just with the and? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll learn this. We'll get there. All right, so let me put some polls here. So we're gonna take a break, and we're gonna 1 second. All right, so we're gonna continue, guys. So we talked about history of automation, where it came from, what are the names, and we talked about where is it used, which environment, high-level overview about the types of tests and scope and so on and so forth. So that maybe it's a lot of info for new beginners. So we're definitely going to get back to these concepts. I just wanted to give you initial overview. but we'll go into the same topics as deep dive. It's important also to understand your role and what you're going to play. Also, feel free to ask questions, and before the class, some topics that would be helpful, especially if you go to interview, you ask some question, and happy to talk about it in the class. That's useful for everyone. Okay, now our automation, as I mentioned, is going to be based on BDD, and implementation is Cucumber. It's going to be Java as a language and WebDriver. But we're going to focus on web applications. It will also be working on mobile, by the way. If your application is a web application that is on the mobile phone, and the mobile browser, right? That also works, WebDriver works for it as well. But if it's a native application, like you download from App Store, Play Store, that's something that is really belongs to specific automation tools like Appium. But the first step in general that works for both mobile and desktop is web application. And then the new world, responsive design and things like that, that essentially adjust the view very nicely. If you change it, if you change the layout, web is really now killer. So important to know the structure. So let's talk about it. So HTML basically is a hypertext markup language, a standard language that's used, right? So we have three pillars out there. One is HTML, obviously. Second is CSS applied to HTML, cascading style sheets. Basically, they add look and feel, the spacing, the font, everything, like all the styles as it's supposed to, right, from the name of it. So like HTML is like building blocks, where style essentially is basically style and the look and feel. And JavaScript is a functional drive. So JavaScript will change the blocks on the page that you work with on the flight. And the JavaScript also fire network connection to the server. So your browser is a client because it's your computer. Client is the one who sends, who asks. Server is remote, the one who responds to your request, sends you data that displayed on your computer, essentially your client. And client server, right? Applications where it involves the browser, who is a client, and the server, who's backend. Normally, backend is Java-based, where the client is basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So JavaScript, essentially, we're not much interested because it just changes HTML. CSS, we're not much interested because it just changes HTML. So essentially, it all comes down to HTML. The good news for automation is that no matter what framework has done to build a software, whether it's a backend, there's a front end. Yes, you might be asked questions like what kind of your application stack, right? So you'll talk about it, and you should know what stack is, of course, as a gray box test engineer. But what's important is that it really doesn't matter, because it all comes down to HTML. So you only learn HTML because everything is served the purpose to generate HTML, which is like something you see on the screen nicely, right? And that's what you interact with. And a simple page that really, without anything at all, it's basically a fill out form here. You can see like a couple of fields, very simple form. And it comes down this HTML structure. So what's important for engineers, when you see something it's complicated, or like break it down, right? Like solve a complicated task, break it down, solve by piece. That's important. So if you see this, what kind of pattern would you highlight here? You try to break down. What do you see as a pattern here?
Head, title, and body.
Yeah, so you can see like on the, so it's called tree, right? There's tree of elements, because the one thing that HTML does, it's relationships. Basically relationships, the parents, children, right? So everything is a parent, everything can be a parent, right? And everything can be a child. So everything is a child except HTML. So that's a root element, very top. You can see it here. And everything is inside of it. Everything is the contents of HTML. You see, and you look closely, right? As I said, there's a head and there's a body. So you can see there's another element, head with contents, and there's a body element with contents also, right? So there's two pieces, parts of it. And whatever is in the body is what you see. Whatever is in the head is it's called metadata. Metadata is something that describes, it might describe the actual data, right? For example, in this case, it says what title is. So this title displays in the tab. So you can always take, if you like, it's really complicated message in the tab. You can always look into HTML and just take it from the title, copy it from there. Okay. So one small secret for gray box engineers. So there's always title tab element. If you see something there, that's how browser works. And you can see here also it describes the encoding. So there also can give some instructions for search engines and so on. So the different things go into head. References to HTML, other HTML, but references to CSS, remote files, and references to JavaScript that's located somewhere else, some libraries, and so on and so forth. So that's what in the head normally. And body is basically everything you see. Okay. Now, if you look more in the body, there's different elements. So you can see the point is that you don't really need to worry much about remembering what H3 means and or input is or BR is. You don't need to really. What you need to know is how it's structured so that you can find the address. Because what's the purpose of this structure for an automation engineer? Our purpose is we should be able to tell the code whether it's a Cucumber, whether it's a Java, WebDriver. We need to tell it what to do, right? How do you tell what to do? You need to say what to do, like you want to click, you want to mouse over, whatever, right? Click, type something with a keyboard, send keys. But you should also be able to, as well, you should be able to give address, right? Otherwise, it doesn't know. Okay, it knows what to do, but where is it? So visually, you always can see and click, right? But the code doesn't understand that. So you should be able to give some location, address, basically. So that's what this is important. So for automation, you don't really worry about is it HT or not, but you should worry what does it have, so you can really point to it and say click on it. Okay, that's what the first type of exercise we're going to do. First step, and that's what majority of time automation engineer spends working with the page as a gray box engineer, using some tools that allow him or her to locate elements, and then find those locators first, and then write code to interact with those locators. Okay, that's why I'm going to take a first step to actually play with locators, because that's what the majority of time of automation engineer is spending, and we're going to do it as well. Any questions? Okay. So let's do closely. So we have element here, right? That's what one piece, that's what we're going to mostly look for. Single element to interact. There's also possibility to pass a group of elements to the WebDriver, but we're not interested in that. We're interested, again, this is more for advanced people. There's possibility to actually do some work with array, but at this point, we are not interested in that. So, and it's not for intermediates or juniors, okay? So to keep it simple, and that's what anyway majority of time engineer spends as well. Majority of time you work with one single element, even if you're senior, doesn't matter. So that's what you're gonna always look for. Be able to select only one element, okay? And the element also has pieces. So this has opening tag. You can see there's angle bracket, and this the name, right? The opening tag. Closing tag, you can see it's basically the same as an opening tag name, but with a slash before that, so that means closing. and what's inside contents. And by the way, contents not necessarily just text. Okay, so this is text node contents. But for example, if I look at this one, like this guy, right? This is contents of body. It's not only text, it's basically other elements, one element or many, doesn't matter. So contents really is not necessarily a text, okay? So in this case, there's a text node contents, this one, okay? It's text. Sometimes there's no contents at all, like a break here, so this is a break, it says make a space, okay? The order you see here, it doesn't matter, it's not gonna be, well, order is, of course, followed, recognized, but the location is not really. So it can be placed whatever it thinks based on its own rules, not what you see visually. But this case will make break basically. And by the specification, XHTML, it's supposed to be name of the tag and slash, but often sometimes it disregarded. So browsers not that very strict. So sometimes you can see this as well, this way as well. It's also fine. Okay, like basically it's like opening tag but without closure. It's a special case. So it's often you can see that. But I mean, by specification, it's supposed to have slash. But if it's not, then it's also okay. It's acceptable. But the point is that there's elements that might not have contents. Also in the opening tag, and it's always only inside of opening tag, they can be or cannot be potentially attributes. Okay, and it's like a comma separated, basically not comma separated. So it's not comma separated, but it's a set of key and value. You can see here. You can see there's a key name. In this case, it's ID equals. That's always like that, and some value. In this case, in double quotes. So header, right? It's value header. It's an identifier header. In this case, it's a name. The attribute name is a name. The key name is a name, and the value of the key is first here. Here you see that space separated. We see another key value pair. So placeholder is a key, and the value is this text. Okay, input first name. That's the value. So that's how the way it kind of works. So you can have normally you will have a lot of attributes, key value pairs. It's called key value pairs. It's always a pair. Okay, but sometimes there's attribute without it. Actually, there's some cases where it's not be value, but it will be only a key. As example, hidden. This is something that just says hide this. It's a way to tell HTML. So that's example of that case. And this is a visual look, right? So essentially, you can see title comes top. Then we have an actual form. It's part of body. So it's, in this case, the same as body. There's nothing else beyond form. And as a heading 3, it's first and second. See, like they're on the same line because there's no break between them. But there's actually 2 breaks under before submit. And then submit button here. So that's pretty much it. So it's essentially, you don't need to know much about HTML, to be honest with you. So I don't want to spend time for it. We're going to learn it as we go. We don't need in this course to learn like all different meanings of tags. It's good if you know it, by the way, but it's not really mandatory. What you should know is just how to work with it, to locate. Okay, because you need to tell, okay, click on this submit button. So you should really find something that be able to be used as locator. Okay, so you can tell, click on that specific button, not other button. But of course, it's a really great source. W3 Schools, I recommend it to reference. Basically, every single HTML tag, including HTML5 tags, are in here. Okay, so that's for reference. Again, it's only you need to go and learn it. You just reference if you want to learn. It's a new tag. You want to look it up, go there. Okay, that's what I recommend. Okay, so next piece is accessing elements. Before I go here, by the way, any questions on HTML? Anyone? Okay, looks like straightforward. So next step is here. So we have access, right? Elements. So basically that's what I mentioned already. You have to way to do it. There's a multiple ways to access elements, not one. There's a multiple ways. The problem is that since we are beginners, if you start learning like 3 different approaches, we're going to get lost. Okay. In automation, there's 2 main ways to access elements. 2 allocation strategies. If you like, there's 2 major ones, and ideally, if you know 2, of course, but because you are beginners, and it's really it will be impossible to do all kind of things. You just get lost. So you need to pick one. Okay. Now, the one that you pick should be number 1, a lot of interview questions around it. Number 2, it should be universal. So essentially, it should cover everything. So you should be able to get by with it. Okay. You should be able to survive with it, even if it's a complex elements. So the 2 major ways to locate elements are, you can help me? Like, who can tell me? What are those 2 ways?
XPath.
And?
Relative XPath and absolutely XPath.
Yeah, there's different types. In this case, I'm talking about specifically XPath is one. What is the second?
ID.
CSS.
ID, name,
CSS.
tag.
CSS.
Well, ID,
CSS.
name, it's all, you just describe all the different key names, right? So ID or name.
Oh, yeah.
By element.
Those are all here. Yeah, you can actually select by ID and select by name, of course, separately. It's a dedicated method for it in WebDriver. However, rarely do you have ID and name, always, okay? Rarely. So more often than not, you don't have neither ID nor name. So you might have something like placeholder, right? For example, or a type or something else, like whatever, right? We'll talk about it. So obviously, if there's ID or name, you go for it. And we'll talk about priorities, but the point is, often you don't have this. And that's what interview questions are around normally, right? So, you guys mentioned XPath. That's pretty much solution to write in including ID and name. You can write select by ID with XPath, select by name with XPath. Again, majority of applications just require XPath. You don't have ID or name every single element. What else? Second, I think you mentioned CSS.
CSS selector.
CSS selector.
Yeah, CSS selectors. Second one. Developers use CSS selectors to define styles. So, like for example, this page is no CSS, so it looks bad, right? And CSS basically are using certain mechanisms to also locate elements and apply style. The problem with CSS, and again, CSS is more laconic, shorter. It's more complicated also because it's XPath. Even if you think it's complicated, it's not, because it's just a bit heavy in syntax. But CSS is, because it's more light in syntax, it's kind of more weird. Okay, especially if you have like partial contains or it's like different ways to many problems. Another problem with CSS is that CSS is not be able to select by text. Why? Because there's no weird logic in the world, right? That says, if you have this text, apply this style. It doesn't make any sense. So by definition, CSS about style, so it should not select by text. So you cannot select by text in CSS. Okay, you can select a placeholder, but it's not a text. It's it's attribute name. You cannot select by this guy. Okay, in XPath you can. So that's one advantage. Another one, you sometimes have to do relative select. Like sometimes something inside, like this one, doesn't have any selector at all. You just have break, and you have multiple breaks. So you have to find some anchor. What's anchor? Is an element that has some selector that's reasonable, like ID. And you start with that, and then you make your way towards something else. Like for example, I want to select a form. Nothing here, okay? So what I do, I select this header element, and then I'll make one level up to a form. There is a way to do, like same as you go like to your file path. Same way you can do also go different, like you can focus here and then move level up and then select this guy, whole form. Okay. So you cannot do it in CSS either. So that's two restrictions that the problem. So again, actually, there's a specification for it, but I think it's not applied yet to CSS. So maybe some new version will come out eventually, but it still would not have text selection anyway. So you can see that in CSS you can actually go down, but you cannot go up. Okay, that's the problem. So that's pretty much the reason, and that's why we're going to focus only on one. So the one that used more often in interview, and the one that lets you survive no matter what. And you can just use only one way and be okay with that. At least, so initially, like first 1 year. So it's basically, and CSS easy to learn once you get into XPath. So we're not going to focus on CSS at all. We're going to really focus on XPath only. Okay. Some of you who maybe practice with XPath know it. You can, of course, look into CSS reference. I can give you some exercises. There's good games that let you learn CSS. I'll point you to it. But if you're new to automation, I don't recommend you to. One of the key points, priorities. So prioritize and learn only XPath really in a good way. And if somebody asks you, like, do you use CSS selector? Say no, we only focus on XPath because XPath covers every single use case, whereas CSS not. So our team decided to not use CSS. I know a lot of teams who made this decision because of that. Okay, it's still perfectly fine. So I give me an element, I can write to XPath selector for it, more reliable. Okay. So how is it written really? And that's what we're going to practice a bit. Okay. So let's say I want to select this form, and that's here you can see actual XPath expression. That's what you tell your code. That's what you would put in Java code or Cucumber so that it can really interact with it. So you can say, okay, like read some contents of this form. Contents of form means that all the text from it, like fill out, and in this case, and nothing else, basically submit button name. So if I say read this form, right, it will extract every single one from it, the text and the button name. So, but you need to tell it like what form really, right? So it can read that. WebDriver can really read from it. So you can verify it. And that's the way you write it in XPath. So this is like called absolute XPath. I mentioned that, right? This is one type of XPath. Basically the way you write it. So you start from the top always. And how do you start? So you just say, okay, first start with HTML. So you start with the root element, means slash. Slash means from the top. Okay. Then you name it one element, which is always like HTML. Okay, then you go slash. Slash means to go to the next level down. So in this case, we have two elements down, right? Head and body. We go with body. So we now at this level, focus here. So you can read left to right always, okay? And then you go with div, because div is the next one under body. And then you go to form, because form is pretty much in this case only one under div. So that's eventually you end up with form selection. This is what the result will be. And this result you can pass to the code. So code can work like a call WebDriver method in it, basically. What's the takeaway? You always look at the end of XPath to see what element eventually it selects, because it's just a path towards it. Okay, just define how to get there, but this is the one that eventually gets selected. Make sense?
Yes.
Now, this approach of writing XPath you should never use, by the way, because it's called absolute. Why? Because you can see from this structure that it calls every single element from the top. And the problem is that one of the things I mentioned in the beginning, maintenance is part of work of automation. It must be part of work. It often is underestimated. Imagine that you have 1,000 scenarios automated. 1,000, right? And imagine you have 10% of false positives, means fail, but not a bug. This comes from a medical term, right? False positive. You do test, and it says something is wrong, but it's really not. You're good, so you're healthy. Okay, so you want to have this false positive test. If it's something that's wrong, right? You want it to be false positive. So it's really positive. It found something, but false because it's not there. So it's called, it found a bug, but it's not really a bug, right? So it's false. Flaky test, basically, simple language. Flaky test is unstable test also, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Partially, it may be because of selectors. So partially, if you have 10% of failures out of 1,000, you have 100 scenarios that broken. And it means that 100 scenarios, let's say you write 3 scenarios per day, right? You need 1 month to write this, at least, right? Maybe more, 5 weeks. And you have to pay money, right? Let's say you want to pay $15,000, right, for this 100 scenarios. So you can lose $15,000 right away. Plus, potentially, if it's bug, right, you also miss it. Plus, you have to put this time of engineer to do manual test for these 100 scenarios, which is even sometimes more expensive because you have to take the time out of repetitive always. So it all comes down to money, really, right? Bottom line is that you want stable tests. You want to fix those tests that are broken. And if you write this kind of XPath, it's not going to be stable because why? Something always gets introduced. Pages always change, right? So this page, the way it looks, the application is under constant development, constant changes. Even that maybe UI would not change. Inside of it might change, like library might change. So the point is that it's highly likely that some other element gets introduced, or like this div becomes span or something, you know, like the name of element might change. So this is going to be broken, basically. Or some extra element might be introduced. That's why absolute XPath is really not recommended because of that reason. So you use instead relative. So relative, much simpler also. So relative is simple, right? So essentially, it doesn't care how you start. Like it always searches on the whole page. And the only difference is that you start with double slash, not single slash. It's always a root. So if you use single slash, there's no way you can say div because it will look for div at the top, which never the case, right? So it's always HTML on top. And then you go to body if you want a visible something, right? And then you have some structure here. And you don't need to do that, right? So you just say slash slash something. Because it's only one element on the page form, that's why it finds it as effectively as the previous approach. That's called relative XPath. Means relative to like whole page. So it just searches the whole thing. So double slash means search anywhere within this context. Initial context is root from the top, so it will search for the whole page, including the head, by the way. So that's kind of the approach there. Now, yeah, that's pretty much one interview question, a simple one that might be asked. Yeah, that's an example of sometimes interview questions that you asked. I mean, the tricky question on the screen. I think it's real. That's real show. Probably it's a real question that needs to be asked. So that's sometimes how the question asked to confuse you, essentially, and in this case, majority of sometimes not majority, but portion of them. It depends on interviewer also. Like if I interview you, for example, I would not try to confuse you. I would just go straight to the action. Okay, I'm not interested in that personally, but some interviews psychologically they like it. I don't know. I have no idea. So, but it happens. So you should get ready for it. All right. So I like mentioned this already, right? So essentially, if you see something HTML body, that's it. So it's avoid and use double slash instead. We also talked about advantage of XPath versus CSS. What do you guys think here? Can you name one or two?
Oh, by CSS, we cannot locate text.
Yeah, actual text, no, exactly. And the second, you cannot go up.
And the tree up and down.
Yeah, down, you can go down, you can. Just
just
up. You can go down, but you cannot go up. I mean, there is specification for it, by the way. It's not just not implemented because we discuss it. It's a lot of bureaucracy in the dev world. Commute should accept it. It may be actually already in trial, by the way. So I would focus on one really, which is select by text. That's the major one. That's really interested in. And sometimes you don't have other option, just text. Okay. Yes, it's not ideal. Yes, it will be a problem with like it's more fragile, but sometimes you don't have an option. But sometimes, by the way, you have data you created, and you want to interact with that data. You created data, right? You know what it is. So whether it's a Chinese application or German or English, you can write your text. Okay, so whatever language you write. So that means that reality is that basically you need this method. That's XPath helping you. All right, so all right, here let's review this more options. Okay, so we have here //h3. You can see it selects header 3. So here is only one header 3. But more likely than not, you have a lot of headings, right? So headings size 3 basically here, or maybe just even div, right? Like you can, instead of this, it might be also, for example, done as div, another div, and maybe it will have a class, right? Something like heading, or like size 3, for example. So instead of heading, it will just have like this sometimes. So if you just say div now, it will select this guy and that guy, both of them. The parent and child, both of them are divs. So that becomes a problem, right? So if you get back to the original headings, which can be multiple of them anyway, what do you do if there's more than one? What do you use in XPath?
Oh, we need to mention attributes.
Yeah, so exactly. So you use predicates. So you use predicates. Predicates always added to the name of the tag. So you have h3, that's tag name, and then you add square brackets like this. So here's the input, right? This is an example of input, by the way. Two of them selected. Another example, 2 inputs, and you want a 1, right? So here you use a predicate, add square brackets, no space. You can see numbers. I don't recommend using space. Sometimes space allowed, like for example, before equals, after equals, you can put space. But I normally not recommend because it really doesn't matter, right? And sometimes space is not bad in other places. They break it, so you don't use space at all. Simple rule. And you can see here you use at. So if you want to refer attribute value, in this case attribute is name, that's a key, and the value is first. So here, right? So this is the way it's done in HTML, but here's how you write XPath for it. You want to select it. So very similar to the way it's here, right? You just take that piece and just put inside of a predicate, and you add at means attribute. That means attribute name. That's what it means. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
As we see, the first have a quote, just single quote, and in HTML code we notice we have the commas with two quotes. Is that some kind of difference or?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I was going to talk about it because it doesn't. So for XPath, doesn't matter. It's okay with both single quotes and double quotes. It doesn't care. Okay, so it doesn't care here. However, I used single quotes on purpose. Why? Because this address we're going to use where? Where is this going to be used? Where do we pass it to? You guys think?
In Java.
In Java, right? To WebDriver. In Java, we want to pass it as what kind of type of data?
String.
String, right? And strings in Java, you should put inside of double quotes always. There's no ability to put in single quotes in Java. Okay, so you always use double quotes. Now, the problem is Java, so you use double quotes around it. That's how you pass it as a string. Okay, like this. And then you also have double quotes here, which is okay for XPath. Okay, but it will not be okay for Java. It will break your syntax. So you have to escape it like this. Okay, and it'll be like, see, like changes to actually not straight double quotes. It'll break the code if you copy this. In the code, always should be straight double quote. This is, it would not understand. But the point is that you have to escape it like this, okay? You have to escape it slash. So it's kind of becomes hard to read, okay? This will work, but it's hard to read. So that's why I recommend instead of this, you just use single quotes always. So you don't need to worry about escaping them and just put them in double quotes, that's it, okay? That's why I always recommend to use single quotes in your XPath selector. It's just a rule, okay? So sometimes there's some rule, like there's some, there's two types of things that you must follow, rules, right? Some rules are strict, defined by the language or framework. Let's say you cannot use single quotes in Java for string, okay? Only double, it'll just not compile. Sometimes there are rules like by convention. Convention means that it's okay if you write something like a different way, but in your team or company or like best practice, it's agreed on the market, right? Like across multiple companies, it's agreed to use certain way because of reasons like I mentioned. So this is by convention, even though it's not going to be breaking, but it's much simpler life if you use this. So whenever code review happens, if somebody notices a double quote, you say, hey, don't do that, it's bad, okay? Because you miss it, you miss to escape it, blah, blah. So that's why you always use single quotes here. All right, so yeah, if you want a last name, just use last. So it like changes the value, and this selector will select second. So this one you pass into Java, right? And then you can say, hey, you know what, I'm going to type text into it. So you input text, but you first need to select it. So that's what this is for. All right, so how you write it, right? I recommend you to write this way. So you just say / input. And now there are automated tool that I'm going to show you that's free, and it's going to be writing for you, by the way. So it was not like that like a few years back. Now it is. However, it doesn't write ideal XPaths, right? Kind of weird XPaths. Sometimes it does a good job, like if it's an ideal name. Frankly speaking, if there's ideal name, eventually you'll use direct ID, direct name. Okay, I'll show you later. For now, we're going to on purpose focus on XPath, because that's how you get used to it. That's how you be able to write more complicated ones. So the tool will be weird writing for complicated XPaths. So you have to do it manually still, okay? So initially it's okay if you take it from the tool, it will auto-generate XPath for you, and you might have it corrected, but you still should be able to write yourself, the cases I mentioned above before, okay? So you have this input square brackets, and you say, okay, I want to attribute. So you put at, because you want to name of attribute. This case is placeholder. And this is acceptable, by the way. It means that I want this input and predicate, I say, phrase placeholder. So I select, in this case, 2, because both of them have placeholder. But if you want specific value, right? So you put equals, and in single quotes, you put the value. Okay. In this case, it's always case sensitive. Case insensitive not allowed. So you always use case sensitive. And also, it is always a full match in this case, unless you tell specifically you wanna something that contains, let's say, only input or last name piece of the sentence. Okay, you always must put full value. So another approach here, you can see if you have 2 elements, you want only 1. You can also use index. And in normal developer world, index starts from 0 always. Okay, but in XPath world, it starts from 1. So it's not really index; it's just number of first element. Okay, so that's what this means. Just in square brackets, you can add this after element itself. So this 2, this is only 1. First one, second one will be 2. Okay. Sense? This is not really recommended way to interact unless there's duplicate buttons that you don't really care which one to click. You know, sometimes you have a form, right? And there's a button submit at the top, and there's a button submit at the bottom. and it's really two buttons exactly the same. So you don't really care, right? So that's why you say, okay, I'm going to click the first one. Okay. So that's what it's about. The only tricky part for index essentially is that it's really recommended to put, like whenever you apply it, see it works this way as well, but you want to put in parentheses the left portion of it. See, like it kind of makes it more heavy, but it's really recommended because sometimes you have really complicated XPath and it's applied to section. So if you have some multiple like levels, right, it will kind of break it, or it will work in a weird way. So XPath also has versions, and browser supports different versions of XPath. It might work differently sometimes, the indexing in different browsers or different pages. So I really recommend use always parentheses, because it will clearly say I want a second element like this. Okay, so that's pretty much what. If you use index, we're going to use this one. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and do some practice, guys. So we're gonna get started together, and the rest of it will be your homework. But I want you kind of spend some time a little bit, okay? I mean, if you don't follow me, it's okay. The main purpose, I just want you to try to repeat something I'm doing. But I just want you to also play a bit instead of just watching, okay? So what do we need really? Number one, I'm gonna post those 2 pages you're gonna work with. Okay, I'm gonna post them in the chat. And let me actually open Slack, and so I'll put it there. So we're gonna work with pages that initially a basic form, and then we're gonna be next page. Okay, so those 2. All right, and then let's see. We'll get back to our presentation. So what tools do we use for XPath? So essentially, the most popular browser today is Chrome. Takes majority of the market, dominant. Any country at this point, I think about 50, 60%, 70% of the market. So you're going to use Chrome. That's number one. There's a lot. So Chrome is based on Chromium. And on top of Chromium, there are other different solutions of the browsers that exist. And essentially, they call differently, but it's all about Chrome anyway. So the version that Google uses based on Chromium is Chrome, basically. That's what they can make their own adjustments. Okay. So, but that's what they're going to work with. And this is the form, right? This is basic form page. This is the first link that I sent to you. So I recommend open your Chrome browser, number one. And then number 2, just put this URL. So what do you want to do? We want to first, I want to show you the way to do natively in Chrome, which is something that's not super popular. It's not convenient, unfortunately, but it's supported. Sometimes you have to go for it, okay? So first way to do it, first of all, you need to open DevTools. That's something that developers work with. That's why it's called DevTools. And that's something that gray box testers work with. So how do you open it? There are many ways, but simplest way is right-click anywhere on the page. So right-click anywhere on the page, and then use inspect. Okay. That's how you get into that screen in Chrome. Actually, any browser uses it, to be honest. Okay, any browser using this inspect mode, basically. So you can see here, this opens up, right? And you can see that by default, it goes to elements section. There's also console, there's a sources. So if some of you worked as QA, I do really hope that you guys know what network is, right? So it really shows you requests and stuff. And from here, very important section is, I think, is disable cache for QA. So it doesn't cache, JavaScript files, because by default, like also says JavaScript is cached. So that means that Sometimes developer fixes a bug, pushes it, but you still see it because it's cached in your browser. There's a way to trigger cache clean, of course, from a server side, but as QE, you should also be able to do it yourself. So that's how you disable it. It works when DevTools open. This is marked. It works every time you refresh the page, it will take it from scratch. Okay, that's what this is. But we are mostly interested in elements section. Okay, here. There is also, by the way, console, which is very important for JavaScript stuff. JavaScript errors will show up here. Okay, and so network is how it interacts with the server, request, response, and console is JavaScript result, errors, logs. But if you want to work with HTML, mostly it's elements. So you can see this left section is elements, where the right section is styles, CSS stuff. And this is, by the way, CSS selector. Okay, it's kind of section here for developers. So we are not interested in this right now. So you can move it a bit. This is what we're interested in. So no matter what framework it is, it's still be HTML in here. Okay. So how do you work with it? Essentially, there's a section here, right? So you can mouse over and it highlights nicely, right? So you can see it works pretty well. But we want to really search, right? So if your focus is here, right, UI, and if you click search, oops, 1 second. If your focus is on UI and you click and you do Command F if it's Mac, or Control F if it's Windows or Linux. So Command F in my case, you can see the search, right? And this search really, the format, so it searches on UI. That's not the one we need, okay? It happened because I clicked Control F and it, Command F, and it really focused here. So I want to click here once, just click, see like changed color a bit. I can click anywhere, doesn't matter. So focus is inside of elements, and then I do Control F again, Command F. At the very bottom, you can see now there's a search, and it says find by string, selector, or XPath. And that's what we're gonna do. So, okay, so let me just try a simple one first, okay? Gonna do it here, okay? So I can see H3, right? And I can write XPath selector for it manually, okay? So how do I do it? Can you guys help me? So it's here at the bottom left. Can you help me with it? How to do it? I want to select H3.
Yeah, /H3.
I always start // simple. And then you say H, basically tag name, it's H3. See, it highlighted this one. It highlighted and stopped. So as I typed it, it highlighted for like a couple of seconds and it stopped. If I want to again search, I hit return or enter, it does it again. Okay, so I kind of re-evaluate it. See, that's how it does. So this is the one. Okay, let's try pretty good. Not just H3, but H3 with ID header. Okay, sense?
Yeah, you need to put square brackets, then
yeah,
add
exactly. So
ID
you need to put
equal, yeah.
Opening square bracket, and then we say attribute at ID.
At
ID equal to in single quotes header.
Header, and then close.
And close, yeah.
If I try to run this one, it doesn't work because it's not a valid expression. Okay, so I have to close this. And as I close it, it's really now in good shape. You can see it found, first of all, it highlights it. Second of all, it says found 1 out of 1. Okay. That's how you write this. Essentially, you can delete this and write something new. So I want to say input. Sorry, / input. See, it finds 2. See, like 1, 2, 1, 2. It says found 1. So it basically, in this case, shows 1 out of 2. You hit enter, 1, 2 out of 2. That's how it does. Okay, it finds more than one, it does it like that. Okay, so that's the section. It's not really convenient. It's kind of like something at the bottom. You can move it actually the bottom side, but it's still like inconvenient, and it supports like multiple some other stuff like by text, which is confusing. So it's not really nice. Okay. But again, it's built in Chrome, always available. Sometimes Chrome is clear without plugins, and you want to do something, so this is the way you do it. Okay, so that's pretty much built-in way in Chrome, in DevTools to write XPath expressions. Any questions on this? If you're going to switch to a more convenient way, but I wanted this first show you. So this second approach that is very popular right now, and it's actually not only in Chrome, by the way, is actually Chrome.
I have a question. How do we display those options at the bottom, like HTML, body, div, form, input?
It sometimes may not show it to you. It depends on your browser config. It's just the view of it.
Because like I only see HTML.
Yeah, you might have these different views and okay, asking voice. Okay, because your focus is here. Okay, it shows the full path. So I click on it.
Oh yeah.
It shows it basically. It's kind of absolute path from the top to this guy. Okay, top means HTML. Then it says body. It says div, form, input. That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
But you might have like different config, like the way it displays. Like you can say it that way, right?
Oh, what if I don't have this search field below the? I don't have this search field below HTML, body, div, form.
Yeah, like that, right? So that's what I said. If you want to display, you want to first click somewhere, like inside like H3, for example, doesn't matter. So you want to have focus inside of elements, okay? One. And then what computer you're on, Windows or Mac?
I switched to Windows for a second, yeah.
Yeah, so this one you do Control F, and then it shows up.
Oh, Control F, okay, here we go.
Yeah, for Mac it's Command, but it's like always standard replaced by Command. And then here you type like whatever you want, right? So VR.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Button. So that's and it hit enter to evaluate. Okay, if it's not valid, it doesn't do anything. If it's valid XPath expression, then it highlights it. Okay. If you suddenly put like span, it also doesn't show. So it's really if you have incorrect expression or it doesn't find it, it's the same result here. Okay, so it doesn't really let you know that's incorrect expression, unfortunately, because it's like universal. It's not only XPath. Okay, so you can see like here H3 it actually shows that it has ID. But what I want to do as a next step, I want you guys to look into Google, search into Google, the tool. So if you look at this guy, so I have already talked about, I actually mentioned my note. So Firebug used to be very popular in the past, but new Firefox, they like really had, like, you know, like they have hackathons every year where they break browsers. So hackers get together to break browsers. Actually, they show vulnerabilities basically, okay, to help browsers to be more secure. And they had like every single time they met, they found vulnerabilities in Firefox. Every single time, and it was like a lot of holes in it. So what Mozilla did, they just rewrote completely from scratch. So like, it's really secure, okay? But the problem is that it broke a lot of old plugins that used to work, like Firebug one. So it's not really working anymore. So you're not worried about it. So we instead use Chrome and Cropat, okay? And you can really search for Cropat in a bar or Google, and then it's first found item, right? You should get to this page. Like Chrome Web Store is free. You can see that just say, in my case, it's installed, so it has remove, but if it's not installed, it will say add to Chrome, okay? So search for Cropat. You can put an address bar or Google. It finds it, first link, open it. It should go to Chrome Web Store, something like this. And you can see it pretty nicely. feedback, like 978, 4.5, and it's 200,000 feedback users. So it's really a lot of feedback. It's actually actively developed. Very nice. It's like similar story as for a WebDriver. It's done by automation engineer actually, who had dev skills. He actually eventually opened his own company because of just one. He just wrote one tool that went really popular because common use case, pain, and he actually, for this product, he opened autonomic company. So it's interesting. So the bottom line is that there's a latest version 6.0 now, and if you install it, just get the latest. That's it. It's good. Okay. It kind of changes a bit. Some people don't like it changes. Some people, and it's always right like that. So better not have regression bugs. I'm happy. Okay. So what happens if you install it? I recommend to close Chrome and reopen it, because if it's kind of start working, but it's weird, like all tabs would not work correctly. So you have to at least open a new tab after you installed it, or just close the whole browser and open again. Okay, that's kind of before you start using it. Then you open this URL, basic form URL, and then let's use that instead. So how do you use it? Also open DevTools. See, by default goes to Elements, it's fine. But instead of using this search bar, we would like to go on the right side. So if you have a big enough screen, actually it shows up here as a crop out. You can see in the right section, wherever styles are. If you don't have a big enough screen, then it's be hidden. So you have to click on these arrows. It will be always last. Okay. That's how it is. So basically, your approach here to go to crop out. Click on it. And as you can see, it's kind of opens up. And now it's ready to go. So it's something already selected, so it's kind of ready for action. Why is selected? Because I have highlighted this here on the left side. So it just automatically highlights it. Okay. So I can click. So bottom line is that it gives you this in here. So see, like it basically provides you for any element you select, you click on it basically, it writes selectors for you. And not only does it write XPath, it also writes a CSS selector. Okay, it's very nice. Good for a reference, right? So see, it tells you relative XPath. It tells you CSS selector for it. It gives you absolute XPath without attributes, only index, like this. And it also gives you tag name. So essentially, to be honest, even though it's kind of nice, everything, it's useless for automation. So we only want to focus on XPath in here. So you can really put filter from here. So it only will focus on XPath only. Okay. That's your goal in here. So it only, it's kind of see like it's a bit buggy, by the way, unfortunately. So with the new versions, there are more bugs coming. But you can here see that that's what. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use selectors and just focus on this because it's kind of still CSS and behind XPath, so it's buggy. That's fine. So we want to really focus on this. So how do you use it? So essentially, you can copy this guy from here. I say copy. Yeah, XPath is copied, and you can paste it somewhere else, like in the code. Like you can just like I can paste it here. See, it's ready to go. Or you can edit it. Just hit here, edit, and it basically shows up here for editing. Okay, so you can have it right there in here, and you can go ahead and change it. So you can click on it, hit enter, and it searches the whole document. So it sees that one element matching, highlights that element on the screen, shows that result here, just this time. Yeah, nice below here, everything found is here. For example, I can just directly also type here, delete the whole thing, // that's my relative XPath, input, hit enter. It has 2 elements matching and actually shows them here also, both of them. Okay, 1, 2. It's very useful because sometimes you find multiple elements, not one, and they're like in different places of the page, and they're very similar to each other. And you need to analyze both of them to figure out how do you uniquely get only one that you need. And having them here, very useful. So you can really say, okay, here's how it's different. See, like input, name is different. Okay. So what you can do, you can really say this and say attribute name equals last. Close that and hit enter. Now it's only one. Okay. So essentially, this is the place. If you want a free type, right, it's here. If you want crop out select for you, you can select it here, or sometimes it's really huge. So you want to really select from here. So you can right click, inspect. What happens? It changes focus in elements, and it also re-evaluates and writes XPath for you in crop out. So this is basically going to go. So what I recommend you guys, really, I mean, you should be able to write yourself and get practice with it, okay? So of course you can copy this, but if you have a bit of time, which I don't really recommend out, you type it yourself. So you can say button. So you need to get used to it, okay? That's the whole purpose. And in this case, it's not really giving you good XPath, by the way. So and it shows you select by text. But I can, for example, since it's only one button, I can just say button. Or I can say attribute. What they do here, the one attribute. What they put here. Question for you.
Type.
Type, right? So add type. And then what else? What do I do?
Equal.
Yeah, equals. So I put type submit. And then close it. Right? See, it has incorrect syntax because it didn't close predicate. But as long as I close it, it's happy, and I need to hit enter. So it really looks for it. And you can see it's only one found. And this also works fine, right? So text, if it's possible, you should avoid because of localization reasons. Sometimes it's not possible to avoid, then you use it, but it's a last resort, okay? Unless you created it yourself. But that's the way you put this together. That's your XPath. You type it manually, right? Or you want to maybe modify this, right? So you click this guy, and I want to change the whole thing inside here. So I can say add type equals submit. That's it. If I let's say close with double quote, syntax error, so it's right. So it will be single quote also. But if I have double quote here, I can have double quote here also. It works as well. As I mentioned, it's not really a breaking rule, but it's more like convention to use single quotes. So you don't need to escape it in Java. So play with this a bit. So that's a tool. Again, this is a lot of time spent by automation engineer by looking for optimal selectors. And interview questions, if they're proper, if it's good company, if it's good manager, that manager should prepare questions based on what you're going to do, right? So a lot of questions we ask selectors. Again, sometimes it seems kind of weird. They just all they do is give coding challenges that have no idea and no difference, no relation to really automation, just development coding challenges, which is kind of weird. But this trend is going away, by the way. It used to be more in past, less right now. So you should get some questions on selectors or kind of practice of using selectors. That's important. Okay. And to answer those questions, you should not just remember by heart, but you should really practice them so you can answer based on your experience. Okay, so this is Cropat. Any questions?
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Maybe I missed it, but is it the case sensitive?
Huh? What's that?
The case sensitive, like
Yeah, it
if
is
we
case
search,
sensitive.
it
Yeah,
is, right?
This is not a text. This is attribute name here.
No, but if we search by the text, then we should start with the capital.
You see, like if I do it capitals S type, not gonna find anything because here it is lowercase.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I haven't shown you how to select by text, by the way. I'm gonna do it. But for now, we're only looking at, I know it's auto filtered, by the way, this like sneak peek. But here, this is what we learned so far, okay? So no problem. We get back here and look at more cases. Let's take a look. So here's, yeah, this is what we looked at. Heading 3 with ID. We also, by the way, can put asterisk if we have certain attribute that we can rely on, and we don't need to really put the tag. Some teams even recommend that approach. They say, okay, if you have some attribute that you can rely on, don't put tag, because let's say tomorrow somebody comes in and says, you know, I don't like SH3, it's too small. And you know what, I want to change it to H4. So developer, hey, do it quickly. So that change it. You know, sometimes that happens. And just somebody comes in, like a small story, changes this. That's why it actually becomes smaller. Won't become bigger, it's H2, or the largest H1, right? So this looks weird, but it changes to H2. Now your XPath expression based on H3 ID submit. So this one is header. Not gonna work anymore, okay? And remember, I mentioned you should think about it. If page changes, how it's gonna affect your selected. If it's dramatically changes, nothing you can do. But if it changes somewhat, which always happens, it should sustain some changes. So that's why, if it's really not a big deal, right? You just put star because you have a nice ID here, which is supposed to be unique, right? So you should always look for unique. In this case, if somebody comes and says, you know, H2 is bad, so let's do smaller. Let's do common sense, like 4 is better actually. This is also working still, okay? So that's the difference. That's why this is sometimes people prefer. But the bottom line, you can put wildcard in the tag name. It is allowed. You, by the way, can also put wildcard in attribute name also. So you say like any attribute should be header. But this is now weird because it's I think sometimes a lot of colliding names, values of attributes. This is not recommended. Okay. So not recommended in attribute name. But sometimes it's a good practice in tag name, as long as you can rely on a good attribute. Okay, sense? So that's this. Let's take a look. What else do we have? Text, of course. So in this case, you want, let's say, there's no such thing as ID at all. There's no such luxury. You just have this. Okay. And there's nothing going to work, right? So in this case, especially if there's multiple, say I have not just one, but I have a couple of forms. Let's say this is form 2, right? Form 2, and let's say this will be recipient. And this will be a sender. Okay. So you have 2 forms here, one for sender, one for receiver. For example, I'm just showing you options. So if I, in this case, go with H4, it's going to select both of them. Okay, and there is no ID. So you want to somehow get that one, for example. Okay. So in this case, you might want to go only by text. And the way it works in XPath is that instead of ID and attribute name, you just use a function. This is a function. XPath supports few functions. Frankly, you only need to know a couple of them. So two, maybe three sometimes. And this is one of them. So essentially like 50% of what you should know across all functions of XPath. This function is extracting a text from that element. And it checks if it's equals something or not, okay? So what I want to do here, I want to say, you know what, this H4, I don't do add text because it's not attribute text. It's a text content, okay? That's why I use this function because function rules, you must use parentheses at the end of it. That's how it normally in developing world. Okay, but then everything else is same. So you do equals, you just say, in this case, my case, sender. In your case, maybe fill out form, right? Because you didn't play with the page. So this works well. I want recipient. It's here, okay? Otherwise, both of them select. So you work with this one, okay? So just to show, it's, again, this is just exercise to show you how do you select by text, okay? I mean, in an automation world, like why would they use this text? It's kind of like, what's the purpose of it? I'm not sure in this case, to be honest. I probably, if I select by text, what I do with it. So it's not, I mean, sometimes click on a button, the button has text, that's clear use case, right? It's more realistic, so maybe this button is a way to go, right? But sometimes you have to select by text. You also review other examples where you must go with text, okay? But here is just reference. How do you do it? Any questions? Okay. Sometimes you want to go with partial match, right? So you don't need to say the whole thing. You want to say only subset. Okay. Now you cannot say just some random words from the sentence and search by those set of words. You always have a subset of string. Okay. So you cannot say like fill and form, right? You can say fill out or out form. That's what you can do here, but you cannot do it that way. Okay. The way it works, the partial match is pretty much simple. Just a bit heavy syntax. The good news of it is that pretty much it's a second function now of this XPath that concludes our intro into all the methods of XPath. So next part is a simple and complicated. It's complicated in the beginning because it's kind of weird syntax, but once you get into it, that's all. The building blocks, you just use 1, 2, 3. That's it. Okay. So the bottom line is that you use H4, and if you use direct text, you put this square bracket. Let's just say text, right? In my case, it's sender. But if I want a partial text, how do I change this? So instead of this, everything inside of square brackets taken by contains. So this method just takes everything. Simple, right? So that's it. So just if you want a partial match, it takes the whole inside of square brackets. And then what you want to really verify contains, right? You put inside of those parentheses. The only extra change you do is, since it's a method with 2 arguments, first argument says what attribute name, second, what it contains. Just have a comma. Say enter. And you can see this is giving the result, right? So essentially this is the same, right? I don't have subset, but this is the way you do by text. So if I do exact match, I have to get rid of this parenthesis, change this to equals. If I want to get back to method, just take contains, parenthesis open, closes before square bracket, change this to comma. Hit enter, works, okay. So now this is a starting point. I always recommend to change this, make sure it works, so you don't have syntax errors. And then you can do really get rid of some certain, other parts of this string. So you really can do partial match now. So if I use original, right, you just even say fill, it will work nicely here. Okay. Questions?
Can we use
Yeah.
some regex with a text function?
No, you cannot use it here.
Okay.
You want to use only partial match. Don't overcomplicate. To be honest, I mean, you can do regex in the Java itself. There's a lot of options. Technically.
Thank you.
So, but again, do you need to know regex as automation engineer? No. Even developers, some developers struggle with it. Of course, it's good knowledge, but it's not really something you should focus on if you don't know. So, okay, this is this XPath stuff. I mean, you can always Google regex, right? So basically, it's like 100 solutions. If you don't know it, there's like all the cookbooks available. So, but yeah, we don't need to focus on that right now. So that's just partial selection. It also works in case of IDs or like attributes, basically. Instead of text, you just say ID. Okay, that's it. Don't forget add ID. What else? Let's say select by placeholder here. Input last name full value, right? You can also add another square bucket. It's basically extra predicate. What this would mean, it's not often used, but it's used sometimes. Just not often. That it just says extra. It says and essentially. Another way to write it is just put that like this and. But I'm gonna keep it simple like that. Okay. So I can actually copy from here, just paste here, and okay. I think this once you copy from the PowerPoint, right? Some characters are a bit weird, so that's why it doesn't work. Let me just do step at a time, okay? If I go placeholder input last name in here, yeah, this is the problem. Now it works. So you can see here is actually, in my case, it's true found because I have copied to form, but that's how you go for it. If you want also to put extra like name last, I can do it. It also works. It's like and here. You can put like, this is another approach, it's also allowed. Okay, you can also put or by the way. So you can actually have multiple different options. Normally you don't do that much case. Normally you just keep it one. Okay. Let's take a look at us. Okay, here's a header we go right. There's ability to go to the parent. I mentioned that. The CSS struggles. So normally if you have slash, right? You normally have, like as you have seen, you have HTML, right? This is everything. Then body is relative, right? So absolute. Then you have form, nothing, right? Because you have to say div and then form. So this is the way you select. See, like this case, both forms selected. You basically go from the top, next level, next level, next level. Okay. You can also start with just div. You can say slash relative div, right? Selects everything. Then from a div, you can say slash form. Then it goes to child. In this case, two children form. So it selects both of them, okay? See, two elements match. It's just a filter. So whenever you have slash, it means you go bottom, you go down, okay? But if you have slash, and then instead of name, you have double dot. This is, by the way, same as it works in case of the file path. It goes to the parent. So like it selects this. In this case, I have two forms. That's why it really selects both of them, but you go to parent with slash dot dot, like here. So it has one, then it goes to top. Make sense? That's how you go up. So why would you do that? Sometimes there's no ability to select form here, especially if there's many. This is the way to do it. Actually, we have actually a good case here. Let's say I want form to be selected to get all contents of form and then validate it. It's a pretty possible use case. If I say / form, in my case, 2 forms. I don't want 2 forms. I want to, let's say, only sender form. Okay. What do? I start with some specific. I have started specifically from anchor element. This is not anchor element because it's duplicated. So what will be anchor element in this case? That's unique.
Text sender, title sender.
Exactly. So in this case, if you use the sender recipient not just by itself, but as an anchor, that will make sense, right? So now look, so I go with / h4 or star text function equals. I don't want partial match here, so just say sender. This is selected, right? And then I want to form that contains it. So I go like from inside to outside / dot dot. So I end up selecting the whole form. Okay. This is actual form selected because it goes to parent. So it used to be here and then it goes here. Make sense? And then I can pass it to WebDriver and I can say, hey, read contents of form, and then say validate that button name here. This is submit. Okay. Sense? Questions? Right. So that's how you move in here. Let's take a look at one more. So let's say you have div, right? And you can have slashes, as I mentioned, just to go down 1 and again 1, okay? But sometimes you don't care that form is inside. You just want to go to H3 inside of div, okay? So what you can do, you can also use double slashes inside. It means that anywhere inside of div, it's like means not only directly, but if it's single slash, it's only directly. Double slash means also grandchildren, not just children elements, but grandchildren also. So all descendants also are examined by this filter. Make sense? Okay, so I think that's pretty much, that's almost done. So the final one, I think I kind of show you already, but here's another case. What I want H3 checked, okay, contents of H3, but I don't, so I want to actually verify the text of H3. So I want to verify text of H3. I cannot select by text because it doesn't make sense, right? So let's say I want to select by text, which I want to verify, and I don't find element. Well, it may be a bug, right? So I want to select that element first, and then extract text from it, and then I know it's selected properly, so I can do some assertion in my WebDriver code. Okay. So I cannot select by text in this case because I want to verify text. So and that's example here, right? So I start with anchor element, in this case last. So let me just do it here. I refresh it so it's back to normal. So what I want to do here, I want to just select first by last, right? So I have a // I have input that has name last. That's the one, right? And then I want to actually select the H3 heading value, the text from it, to extract from it. I cannot do it directly, right? Well, I cannot, in this case, has ID, but let's say it doesn't. So the way I can do is go to parent. So it has the whole form. And from here, I can go again bottom, right? I can go back to input. So like I start with input, I get back to both inputs. But in this case, I want to go to H3. So I get text from it. So this is the way to read it. Okay, so you start from anchor element, That's why I said, if you look at XPath, the last element is the one that's going to be selected, okay? This result is always H3, okay? But here's the path, that's why it's called XPath. So you start from here, you just do piece by piece, okay? Then slash dot dot means one transaction, you go up. It's like a file directory, right? And then you focus on this one. Then you can go from here again, another level up, now to div, or you can go to H3, down. That's the way to write. Make sense? So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with XPath, to be honest. So, and it's important. This is actually. Is there any questions? So important piece here. Go ahead. Question.
So basically, the last example that you showed is we need to use it in cases when there is no ID, right? So for instance, it's just H3 and the fill out form. Okay,
there's no, it only valid. There is no ID, just reference, right? So if this is like that, then that's the only way to get text from it. So,
got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the important part is really practice, right? So I have a couple of things for you to practice, and we're going to use. So this is going to be a homework. Essentially, to have more fun, is basic page too simple. Like we're going to use the quote project. It's a very simple project, basically. At the same time, it's good enough to start, right? So this is the first kind of test project we're going to start with before we go to some real site. So from here, we go and we start. So here, this guy is responsive. What does it mean? If I change this, it actually changes also. Okay. So it responds. This is desktop, tablet, mobile. So the point from here is that there's a bunch of elements, right? Different types. That's all we need essentially for practice. In this case, here's what we want to find, right? So first of all, for all the write XPath for all required field labels. So that means whatever you have red dot, look at those elements. What do you do? So I can actually do it together. It's a bit complicated for beginners, so I'll show you. Look, so those are required fields. Required means they have star, right? This is more like real site, based on Angular. So you can see a bunch more attributes. So how do I do? I want to see some pattern. I look at username, this guy, right? Look at email, this guy. Those are both required. And I look at not required. Let's say font, not required. So you can see label for font, that's all in opening tag. I never look at closing tag, it's the contents here do not matter. Label attribute for equals font. Let's take a look at this guy. Label.
For the true.
Yeah. So this guy has class required, by the way, and it also has area required. So it has
the text contains required.
It's not text actually. There's no text. I don't see any text. Actually, there is text, right? But it says username. It doesn't say
the attribute then.
Yeah. So attribute. Let's start with class required. Okay. So how can you do it? We can just open Copilot, and I just type here, right? So I would say label shows all the labels. Look, okay. And in here I can just say, okay, how do you define a class value? Pretty so the class is what attribute, right? How do I filter by?
Add class.
Yeah. So I put this in square bracket, say add class equals required in single quote. This is basically selects. That's what I need here. Okay, so just example. There are some other options like it's more tricky, but another example for your country, for country of origin field. So this is your homework. So you see country of origin, inspected, and I see select. But I want to see options. So click on it, see like options. So you need to write expat for your country if it's present in country of origin. Okay, so here, just put in here, just manually type, write it. Of course, you can click. Actually, this is not. Yeah, it actually shows you. But see if its text is good or better value. So try to avoid text whenever possible. Okay. It also kind of by weird reason always puts contains, which is not necessarily completely in this case. So don't worry about contains. Put direct match for value in here. Okay. So your homework is to write down and send in email. Okay. For now, we're not putting in the code because we're not coding yet, but we're coding in the browser already. Okay. That's expat is also code, piece of code in expat language. So that's what we start learning from there, from the top. That's what you do day to day as automation engineer. So next class, we're going to put in the code. Okay. But for now, we're going to work with browser and just write down on paper. So yeah, and it's the same. So for date label from application section using text. So this means you want to use text as a precondition, just for exercise purpose. Date. So date label, this guy. Inspected. Just write expat using text. Okay. Don't use contains. There's no reason for contains here. And this guy says for date label without text. So try to use other options. I showed you before. So this doesn't have ID or something. Try to find other options using anchor. Okay. Another option for allow to contact me via email or phone, spam, using partial text. This guy. So write expat selector with partial text using contains. Okay. And then another one is also same, but without using text. So what else can we do? Again, same. Would you use some neighboring element? Then go here. That's your goal to figure out. And that's pretty much it. So I'll send you a cheat sheet also. This guy. That's what we pretty much reviewed today. So simple one, just select the tag name / tag. This one is with attribute. This is when you don't care about the tag name. Text. Contains example. Same contains just for attribute. This is like several put together, stack. This one is using index. Just make sure you put parentheses. This one is going to parent. So select something and then you do dot. And then this one is when you have in the middle, let's say inside of div, just find this. This is direct match, by the way. It says you have select, right? And you have an option under select. This is good when you have multiple selects, means that this is country of origin. This is country of destination. Okay, so that's why you don't want to mix them up. So that's why you define also the select itself, the drop down purpose. Okay, and it's like a kind of weird way, right? Let's see if this works actually. So this is also supposed to copy pastable. Yeah, it is working. Select something. So the goal of this is just okay. I started application here. Then you go one level up. See, like this one, not enough, right? One more level up. Now the whole section. And now from here, I can actually select allocation. So why would I go with that? Sometimes, like I found this. Sometimes it's multiple boxes. So I want to say I'm searching for location inside of this box only that contains text application. Okay. That's why there is the field. So the way to read it, just start from here, understand where it goes up, second time up, and then all the way, like within that section it's found, it looks for location. So that's kind of the idea of all of it. Basically, just go piece by piece. More often than not, you're going to write XPath just like this. Okay, so simple or like this. Sometimes you have to write XPath like this or like this. Okay, that's why it's important you know how to do it, you practice. That's why even for simple cases like ID, we still write standard XPath because that's going to be the basic of your exercise. There'll be some extra homework also I'm going to give. Flo's going to play on top of this with the same project. So that's pretty much it. So just to close today, I just want to say that the job search is a really not simple exercise, right? I just want to call it out. So it has multiple steps. Okay, so first of all, you post your resume, apply for. So you either post resume, so you're waiting, or you apply directly to some sites like Indeed.com directly, like where it's not through agencies, but posted directly by the companies. So there's like different scanners like Indeed.com and Angel.co and so on and so forth. Give you direct access. You can apply. Sometimes you're okay with agencies like Dice.com and others. So agencies find you and they're also going to sell you, right? They're going to get money based on that. You don't care, right? Because your goal is to find your job. So it's actually good, right? A good incentive for them. But that's the first step. So once you get there, you go to recruiter phone screen. And if you pass it, so this is HR, right? And if you pass it, you go to hiring manager normally. So sometimes it's team member also. Sometimes it's hiring manager wants to talk to you initially, or team lead, or whoever from the team representative. And then instead of on-site today, everything is remote, right? So instead of on-site, there's basically just the next interview, which is just deeper. Normally here you have a team interviewing you, more detailed, deep dive coding sessions here. And then if you're good, then you go job offer, right? Sometimes it's swapped. Essentially, like HR approves you, recruiter approves you, move forward. You get deep dive, and then the final is hiring manager. So more often it's like this, by the way. So because here is multiple people, we want to save time, right? So it's only one person here. So it's more kind of making sense, right? So not get people off work to interview you, because this is maybe a long one. If you count in person, it's on site. If it's remote, then it's just team interview. And it's like, I just want to show that it's pyramid. So it's really not, the point here is that to get one job offer, it's not really that easy, right? So it's so my point is that even if you know what it is, you have to go path, okay? So what kind of path? For example, just want to say, so if it's, let's say if you want to get here one, right? Let's just actually pick from the top. So if you want to get one or two job offers, so you can select, pick it, right? Pick the best one. Then from on-site, if you get to on-site, probably conversion here is not that low. So probably from here, you might have like 2 to 5 on-site interviews. It's expected. Now from hiring manager, probably you'll have another. So probably actually, let's put it 3 to 6, probably more realistic. And here you have like a 6 to 12. And then with recruiter, probably you have a 24, around 20. So 1 to 3, 50, 30%. And here you probably 200. So even that you're looking for cases like an optimal scenario, right? They're doing good actually. You might still not fit, right? You just culturally, whatever. You might not like them. They might like you. It's okay, right? Some teams you don't want to be with, to be honest. But the point is that you have to have like 200 at least if you're really successful. So maybe if not, then it will be like 400. Let's be more optimistic. 200 to get 20 phone screens. So 1 to 10, right? Maybe 1 to 20 is more realistic, as I said. Then you go with 6 to 12 phone screens, which convert 3-6 of team interviews, which you get 1-2 job offers. So it's really a path, right? Even if you're good, you have to go it. So I'm just saying that don't think, okay, you know what, and nothing happens because you need post enough. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're bad or something, right? It just didn't post enough. Sometimes that's a path to go. That's why I recommend around middle of the course, start searching. So you start getting phone screens, some phone screens, and you learn from it a lot, right? Then you go to next level, then go to next level to get eventually job offer. And it doesn't stop here. It's also important, right? So first day, very important. How you present yourself, right? Make sure you have intro. Very important. People like first impressions, critical. First week at the job, also very important. How you work. The month, very important. In a quarter. So normally people like say like 30, 60, 90 days plan. Good manager does it for you. Expectations. So after a quarter, if you do good, then it's good, right? If it's good job, you're happy. And that's how it starts from there, right? What I want to say is that if you really do good, your job is also a kind of interview, because a lot of offers you might get by not going to interviews, by the referrals. You work with someone, somebody left, moved somewhere, right? Remember, you need good engineer. So in that case, if they refer you, then you might skip through recruiter, right? You might get straight here, or even here. So you still have to go to interview, of course, but you, instead of this path, right, you cut it through like to really high chances of yourself. Okay, if they refer you, recommend you, then maybe your chances like doubled. So like you have like 70% of getting a job, for example, right? So that's also important, that I want to make sure it's you make good impression, be proactive, and you build your resume also. As you work there, you kind of continue working on it. Because that's the purpose of this course, I find a job. So I think that's it from my side, guys. We had gone a bit over time today, started a bit later, but that's okay. It's first time. Next lessons, expectation. We'll have a Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. I'm going to post recording, and I'm going to get a link for you to Confluence. So you get a link. Let's say it's the first time today. So if there's technical issues, then by tomorrow you get a link to recording. But I'm going to post today the homework, okay? And so you can really get started with that. And also give you slides. The slides and the homework, you get it. And if somebody wants to go to recording for homework purposes, then you get it tomorrow. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Please show us a good resume for automation engineer. What is the strong point for good resume?
Strong points?
What points? Yes.
So strong points, there's no, I mean, it's all impression, to be honest, right? It's not, there's strong points will come if you have good practice. So I personally think that you should, like if you're a beginner, you need to work on two things. Number one, you need to really by heart remember something, right? Like you have some question, you have answer. Because sometimes people, especially have issues with the language, it's hard, right? So always good to remember by heart some definition, for example, like your example, what Cucumber is. It's behavior-driven development, right? Framework for automated test cases, right? And blah, blah, blah. So you memorized it, you answered. But then what's really important, the second piece, right, that people miss always, is reference to real practice. So you not only you say definition, but you say, you know what, we used Cucumber, and you have some story, right? You say, okay, we initially used TestNG and it was purely code. And then you switch to Cucumber, which is very nice. It's like sentences. QA can write it directly, right? So there's no niche issues with translation. So you used to translate test cases into kind of TestNG test cases for JUnit. And a lot of was lost in translation. Cucumber allows you directly write this format. So there's nothing lost in translation. And it's also non-technical people can contribute. That's some kind of example you can tell, right? And again, how can I tell it? Only by practice. There's no way you can memorize this or, That's why the practice is important. Once you have some path to go, you have less questions like you ask, like how do you write perfect resume? Because you'll be able to summarize what you actually work on, what your test project was, and maybe you can implement it at work. That's perfect. That's my recommendation, I guess. Again, you get some real practice at work, and that's how you get real benefit, right? You say, what did you save? How much time saved? Strong for automation, value, right? So QE, you do manual tests, right? You less of the time. You get paid by hour, right? As a contractor or full time. That's problem. Automation does not require person, right? So it saves a lot of money to the company. So QE can focus on intelligent tests. So that's the reason. That's where majority of points will be: how you save time, how you automated, how much percentage of tests that you automated, right? What frameworks you used, and things like that. So I have some samples for you, but you have to adjust them and use yourself. So that's by your practice. There's no such cookbook like go there, do this. Only by practicing you kind of get the realization of it.
I have a 20 interview, but first question for me: what do you have experience in automation testing? I have 1 year. Oh, sorry, bye. Yeah. How strong skills for automating tester who have experience 2 years?
I think then you go to wrong interviews if that's the case. Okay, so or maybe you make a bad impression because maybe they just say bye, not because it's 1 year, but because you just a failed interview for other reasons, right? Based on your attitude, based on your results of coding challenges, based on your answers, whatever, right? That's why I said you need to look at the overall picture, and I don't think 1 year of experience is a problem in automation, to be honest. Plus, you can always refer to the work you're doing. A lot of QE work right now is connected to automation, right? So a lot of work, QE engineer title, relate to automation also. So more connection you bring, right? And again, it should be real connection that you work at some job, you say, you ask your manager to help, right? So again, if you're good position, normally they want to help you. If they're not going to help you, that means that maybe something you do wrong. How can you improve, bring more value so people more receptive to your requests? Maybe it's not your fault, maybe it's just very strict rules, that's it, right? Then you want to look for a job. But I don't think it's a problem, to be honest with you. The current market, it's not a problem. So if maybe just bad interviews, or maybe you need to go through some path, practice more, and then you get a better result, 100%. We'll talk more about it. I think it's a long talk, so I would like to adjourn for now. But this is something that comes with your investment, your time, your practice, so you can really build experience going to this path. It's a boot camp, right? It's not something like you come just listen and go. You expect it to do practice. So after this session, I'll send you the quiz. You answer the quiz. Based on quiz, we'll break down the groups. So before next lesson, we'll make sure you answer it. I'll post it, and we take it from there. So thank you guys very much. Have a good night, and talk later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Slava.
Thank you.
Thanks, Slava.